So we're going to start out with the dancing, right?
Start dancing. Dun, 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 dun. Hey, everybody. Welcome to another episode of the Little RPG Podcast. I am Ramon Mejia. I'm here to bring you list Little RPG reviews, news, and, of course, author interviews. And this week, it's the author interview thing. I have a wonderful special guest here for the show. He's written three different novels at this point, Codename Freedom 1, Codename Freedom 2, and Underworld, and he's working on Underworld 2 apparently at this point. So for you folks at home, that's a little bit of a teaser. But we're here talking about his latest release, which is Codename Freedom, The Goblin Siege, which is the second book in the Codename Freedom series. Welcome to the show, Apollos Thorne.
Thank you, sir. It's a pleasure to be here.
Thank you very much for being here. I have to say, like you and I have kind of like tangentially like known each other, I think, for a couple of years, like online.
Yeah.
So it's kind of weird to like this is the first time we've like kind of just talked together like on video. I feel like I know you better than a lot of the other people in my life, just because we've seen so much on Facebook and stuff, man. So it's really nice to
Oh,
actually talk to
yeah.
you in person.
Yeah, it's awesome. I've been, well, a fan. I guess we both kind of started out fans and been a fan of you. So, yeah,
Yeah,
love
we
it.
kind of the same like story as far as like the writing portion of our lives. We were big consumers of lit RPG, and I think you started writing before I did. Like, but you started on the Royal Road, and you started with I think it was Codename Freedom 1, wasn't it?
Right. Yeah, I think October of 2015. Was it 15 or 16?
I looked on your Royal Road. You said 2 years ago, so I'm gonna go 16.
16. Yeah,
Yeah.
that sounds good.
So yeah, and then like I think I started writing very shortly after, like the rough draft of what I was writing. I think I did publish before you though. Like I published on Amazon a bit before you did
Hmm.
though. Yeah,
Oh,
so
yeah.
it's a very interesting journey for both of us, just like as fans into writers. And I think that story is very common among like the to what I consider like the best celebrity stories. Like we're enthusiasts, we love game mechanics, we love RPG mechanics, we love the genre, and it's that kind of pushes us into not just being consumers but creators, and that passion for the genre and for the storytelling I think comes through, and that's what makes other fans appreciate our work, because they can feel the enthusiasm, they can feel all the hard work we put into it, I think.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I completely agree. Um, there's something about having that love. And I mean, I think both of us probably encourage almost every fan that mentions that they want to write something. I mean, just do it. Just sit down, start doing it because I mean, that's kind of what it's all about.
Yeah, definitely. There's no gatekeepers to say you can't. It's not like those days
Yes.
when the only people who are going to publish are like the people with like degrees in writing, and they have to go to publishers. Now
Yeah.
that's the only way you can do it. It's literally you write a thing, you put it on Amazon, and people will buy it or they won't. And so
Right.
a lot of the responsibility is on you, but the opportunity is there as a platform, I think, to find an audience for like even like smaller niche stories like ours. Like we don't like relative to like people like Stephen King or like the top bestseller list on like the New York Times or something. Our audiences are relatively smaller, but they're still enthusiastic, and it allows for like a much tighter knit community, I think, that I love.
Oh, yeah.
So there you go. Before we're already like talking about business, I should do the introduction thing first. So before we go in, we have a couple people in the chat room already saying hello. We have Did Wilmarth asking where's the bacon. Uh, you also have Sean Callahan saying greetings from Santiago on the wrong side of Ecuador. I didn't actually know that's where he was. So
Ah,
there's yeah. So good to know. We have an international audience with us live today as we do this particular recording of the author interview. So everybody, hi, everybody who's in chat, and hopefully we'll get more people coming up in. And look, there's Apollos Thorne saying, "Hey, what's up, guys?" Yeah, in chat. So there you go. He's in two places at once, ladies and gentlemen. Okay, so for
trying.
the folks who don't know who you are, Apollos, I know members in the community who are on Facebook and other places recognize your name. You're a very frequent contributor to a lot of different posts, and just like supporting the community. So who are you? Give people who don't know who you are a little bit of background information on you.
Sure. So bacon, and that's
Yeah.
I don't know. I'm associated with bacon,
Mm.
but I got started with lit RPG on Royal Road. Everybody from like Travis Bagwell, Luke, Blaze. There's just like a bunch of us, yourself, and it's almost like there was that void where there wasn't anything on the market at all. And whether it's Sword Art Online, I'm trying to think because there was a lot of stories. I think the game was one of the earlier ones, Cosimo Yap. I don't actually remember some of the earliest ones that I was reading on Royal Road, so my bad. I owe you guys because I mean the inspiration, right? But I'm kind of an oddball. I grew up, I was 50% jock, 50% geek. Um, I was like on a travel soccer team from really early, football, basketball, track, everything through junior high, high school. But at the same time, my first RPG was like whenever I was 6 or 7, Dragon Warriors on NES. Um, I built a computer just with the manual and buying the parts online. Or I didn't buy it online. I didn't have a computer at the time. I don't even remember how I got that. Anyways, whenever I was 14, it took me like 24 hours. That's whenever you had jumpers and you had to, like install each driver 3 times to get it to work with just the pain that it was. But I used to like compete in high school, like repairing and that kind of thing, computers. So there's that part of me. And then the rest of like who I am would just be going from like RPG to MMO to, I mean, we could probably stay there for at least half an hour, not longer. So I'm a gamer, always have been, just love it. And I mean, a lot of this I don't think would even be here if it wasn't for that aspect of it, because it's almost like created this world for us where the progression and um, well, yeah. So that is me.
Thank you very much. You've definitely established your nerd cred with the audience at the point. But yeah, I absolutely, I understand exactly what you're saying. I was 100% nerd, always, forever, never a jock at all. I'd lose my breath walking upstairs as a teenager, so I was definitely not me. But I definitely can appreciate the bones of what you're saying. Is that you grew up with RPG systems, you grew up with those video games, MMOs, and that kind of laid a foundational work of like game mechanic understanding. And I think that's the case for most of like the really good writers in our genre, is that they come from a gaming background. It's like the common writing advice is write what you know, and we know video games, we know RPGs, we
Yes.
know those systems even tangentially, because we've devoted literally probably thousands of hours of our lives, which is it's just kind of a sad thing to say out loud, to these video games and these systems just sitting in our living rooms, and but it's allowed us just like this unique perspective of like understanding this culture, this gaming culture. And as we've grown older, we're also regular adults who have kids and families and whatever, and can always
Yeah.
appreciate the fact that we just kind of don't have time to game anymore. But these novels, these little RPG stories that we've just discovered, and there were gems. I remember just 2 years ago, exactly what you're talking about, just like scouring Amazon for like every like
Yeah.
one release a month, and then having to go look through the internet for more because you didn't have your fix. So I absolutely get that. But like those novels kind of took the place of like, oh, I can still feel like I'm gaming. I can still have that same love of these mechanics and these wonderful adventures with these characters that are amazing. And there's like progression system where it feels like I'm becoming, as the character, more powerful. And it's just a wonderful, genre. So I can actually appreciate where your background comes from and how it attaches to writing lit RPG.
Yes.
It's
So
great. So there you go. A couple notes in the chat room. Looks like we have Bone Tower jumped in. Soforn Bun. Yeah, so there you go. Dave Wilmar says all goblins must die. He also says
amen.
computer club equals legit geek status. Yeah, I agree. Computer club stuff. I think if you can build your own computer, even though now it's more expensive,
Yeah. Yeah.
you definitely have the cred to in that community in that respect. Now we're talking here about not just having a good chat, because we can do it all day long,
Sure.
but we're here specifically to talk about your novel. It's the Codename Freedom, the Goblin, I read here somewhere, the Goblin Siege. There you go. But
Yes.
this is part of the larger series for the Codename Freedom series. Can you tell us a little bit about like the elevator pitch for your series for people who don't know what it is and would possibly be interested in like reading it?
Sure. So we kind of talked about this, and I was thinking about that too. Almost like uh, Dragon Ball Z meets lit RPG slash this is where I kind of got stuck because it's almost like Rocky, or it's almost like um, really you're taking a regular guy who in the future, whenever VR is a thing, I mean, a couple decades from now, I mean, we're going to be so jealous of our kids or whatnot, but they're going to have like esports where they can like do virtual reality for a living, that sort of thing. So taking that idea, like taking a regular guy with that dream, you have kind of an everyman, and then what technology would it take to actually make him into like a super saiyan or whatever? Not in the silliness of that, but like really to make him that strong and be able to take on these insane things. So that's where the idea came from. And um,
And there's nothing silly about that, sir. I'll talk. I'll put that out there. That seems like a wonderful story idea that I think geeks over the world have
it
kind of questioned.
is, yeah. And now, of course,
I have to
not
question like
silly
right off the bat,
as
like, is there going to be a hyperbolic time chamber at some point in your story?
no,
No, ah, too
yeah,
bad.
yeah. But oh man, yeah, and I seriously consider those things.
Mhm. Yeah, I do too.
But
When as soon as I mentioned like, oh, it's like when you gave me that description privately, like, oh, is the fundamental premise of this like question, and I asked myself, what would it take for technology to turn somebody into like a super saiyan? And like just that progressive like
yes,
training, working hard, like they still have to work super hard to do it, but like that kind of like almost anime aspect of like just training super hard to beat your next opponent, and that's kind of the superpower. It's like the ability to just
right.
like train the heck out of your life, the same way that the Rocky film is doing that kind of aspect
Hmm.
of it. And to me, like the first time I was like, oh, hyperbolic time chamber would be amazing aspect. Like maybe he goes into a special training room that does like double advanced time because there's already a time compression aspect in the story. I think to some degree. And so like why not do like a special little training room like just to beat like some super saiyan like some Frieza like boss. I was like so many like
Yeah,
weird thoughts popping in my head.
yeah, yeah. It's one of those concepts that, well, I remember too. Now this was pretty early. There's so much stuff now, so much stuff I haven't read just because I try to write as much as I can. So that's probably the worst part of it. Um, Not being able to like get all the new stuff and kind of go through it. I know you
Yeah,
have
I do,
uh
but you know it's this is my
you
full-time
kill
life
it,
now.
man.
Yeah.
But um like that concept, I especially with the earlier lit RPGs, it almost seems like something was missing, the realism part, and that's where the whole jock part comes in. Where, like at one time, I was trying to be a personal trainer,
Oh yeah, yeah.
and
I remember that. Like in the first novel, there's definitely like this camp separation between gamers and professional athletes. 'Cause I, let me give like a quick like introduction to the
mhm,
series, just because we're going to be talking about a bunch of stuff that
sure,
relates to it. And I want the audience to relate a little bit to it. So you have a lengthy novel description for book one. Will say book two has
I
like seven
changed it.
lines.
I
Yeah,
changed it.
the book two is like seven lines. I know it's like book one
Yeah,
has like 27, I think, as an introduction. But it's basically there's a professional gamer, Lucius. He wants to get in like the latest and greatest gaming opportunity, and he gets into this program, and he finds once he gets into it that it's this full immersion virtual reality system better than anything he's ever been into, and he loves it. And it's a realistic fighting system. None of this magic hotkey hoo-ha, baloney kind of stuff. Anything you need to do, you
right.
have to learn how to do it the right way, like the proper murder way. So there's also this whole training aspect of like learning how to actually use weapons, swords, spears, shields, whatever. And so there's this hardcore like a realism aspect to the story, and at the same time there's also this hidden level of like, oh, there's some secrets happening with government and nanites, and like their bodies actually changing and them being able to like learn things at a very quick level. But the fundamental premise is that all these people are gathering together to try to learn how to combat within the game system, like these monsters that are going to attack their hometown. And if they don't like actually train, and if they don't actually appreciate how much hard work it's going to be and work together, they're going to be wiped out. And like the big
Right.
twist later on is like, oh, they feel real pain. Like the pain level is turned up to 100%. it matches the realism aspect to it. And the big question is like, oh, who's going to skip out? Who's going to like take off on this game because it just became too hard? And who's going to stay? And that's like the fundamental question for book one is like, is the pain going to be worth it to become essentially a better you?
Right.
In the aspect of the story, and won't spoil like the whole bunch of comment system and stuff up. But that's kind of the fundamental core concept for book one. Now in book two, it slightly changes in that there's a little more training and there's a little more focus on even some supernatural aspects, but the core storyline still stays there. So
Right.
that's essentially what it is to me. I don't know if you agree or not as the author.
Oh yeah. I would say especially that first part that I just didn't mention, which I should have, about how the game system, it's not a deep dive at all. You're literally just in like this floating space with the correct machinery, which I leave vague on purpose because I want your imagination to take over. Basically, it's advanced to the point where it can completely simulate anything that happens in the game, and your body's actually having to go through it. So whenever you're running, you're running. Whenever you're eating, you're eating. So every single thing, you're literally living in this virtual world. Your body's fooled 100%, um, which sets it up with okay. I think some of these concepts we're literally going to eventually have to deal with, like real athletes versus sports, especially once virtuality takes over. Because at first, I don't think we're going to have deep dive. I think that's probably kind of
Yeah,
slowly going to get there.
it's a little
But
science fiction fantasy-ish. Yeah, like
yeah,
the virtual, like the omnidirectional treadmills make a lot more sense on a technical level than getting surgery to your brain.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. um, I mean, so you'll have like gamers versus jocks. I think that's actually one of those things that's coming, and it's going to kind of merge. And um, so that part I just found interesting. I mentioned it's not even, it's kind of a theme more than it
Right.
is like
And it's
plot.
something that disappears a little bit in book two, I think.
Hmm.
But in the original version of this one, where what everything was very continuous as far as like a lot of the content from book one into book two. So it's very interesting from my perspective just to see how you modified your story and kind of broke it up a little bit because the version you had on the World Road was very much like this serial story, if I'm not mistaken.
Hmm.
And so all this stuff was kind of mushed together a little bit differently.
Right. Yeah. And that's partially, I was just learning to write.
Yeah.
Some of the characters got away from me, which I told people all the time on there. And now that I've gone through it, it's kind of how I originally imagined it, thankfully. But also like the concept about, like the jock versus gamer, whenever they're finally done and they come out and then they're coming into the world and it still exists, but it doesn't exist within the people, or does it? Like there's certain things that I'm thinking about doing with that, but um, yeah, I won't go into it. Oh man,
So there you go. Now, David Martha in chat room actually has a suggestion. He said, just hang bacon in front of them on a string and they will run all day long. So referring to, I'm assuming, the like virtual training system you have for the gamers.
yes,
Yep.
especially Klein, um, that character. He's actually based upon a MMA fighter that I kind of train with briefly, kind of a coach, and just how like they can be extremely serious whenever it's necessary, but if it's not necessary, they're just totally um, out there, just full of it and hilarious, fun. I mean, it's like it never stops. So that's where he came from. He's kind of, I stole him. Um,
No, there's definitely like some very good secondary characters besides Lucius, jocks, geeks, just like good camaraderie between the characters within his group. I think that's also a big draw factor for me and for a lot of readers is that oh, you feel like you're hanging out with your friends or people who are friendly and have this like banter going, and that's a interesting social aspect. Is that instead of just it being a bunch of like action stuff, it's like also you
right,
take a break, you hang out at the bar, your local pub or whatever, and you hang out with your friends and you grow together hopefully, and
right.
that's definitely a big draw for a lot of people. Those fun, interesting characters.
Yeah, yeah. And if you don't have the reaction of people around you, characters that you care about, it's almost it just doesn't matter. Action can become so bland so fast, and I mean that's why I know in the first one more than the second one. Of course, the second one's only been out for a short period of time, but I kind of got some pushback because there's almost so much character. Um, but at the same time, I mean, there's a lot of action in the first one too. So
Right, you're never going to please everybody. Somebody's always going to complain about
no,
something. Oh, there's too much character. No, there's too much action. No, there's too much training. There's why is it in virtual reality? Who cares? It's going to be something with somebody, I guess.
yeah,
But as long as people are buying it, I'm like, hey, you complain all you want after you've heard just about it.
yeah,
Yeah.
I love you too. Ah.
Now, Dave in the chat room says he stole Ramon for his last book. Dave is the author of The Undying
Nice.
Lands. He did toss me in there, and actually for some other books too. But he says he's going to steal you next. He's going to put you in, I think, his next book or so. Yeah,
Sweet.
yeah. That's always fun.
um,
Isn't it always fun like when your writer friends put you in their novels? It's like, oh, that
I
was
love
very
it.
nice of them.
I
Unless they're
should
like,
wear a mask.
yeah, unless they make you like this weird evil like supervillain. Even then that can be kind of cool.
Hmm. Yeah, I didn't think this through. I should have wore something.
Well, I think
Just like
your
bacon.
like your regular Facebook picture has you on there, and your picture's out there as your author page. I think it's like is that
Yeah,
like your wedding photo on your author page?
it is.
Yeah, I thought
Yeah,
so. I recognize that suit. I wore that suit too. I'm like, and I look
that's
like
awesome.
pretty thin. I'm like, that's a few years ago, and like many pounds earlier for me. So I'm like, I recognize that outfit.
Yeah, it's just such a easy photo to use, and I loved
Yeah,
it. Um,
it's like probably the one like nice photo I think I've ever taken in my life. So I'm like, hey, yeah, use that as your as your author pick.
oh yeah, yeah, and of course, as guys, how often do I really care what I look like?
Yeah,
I mean, there's a certain extent I want to. Well, I have to have a geek shirt on every day, and then I wear cargo pants
yeah.
or
Like the only
shorts.
thing is like
So,
I cut my hair and I shave for my wife because she has to live with me. Me, I don't care. I only groom for my wife's benefit because
yeah.
otherwise, like she'll probably leave me if I just like gain 300 pounds and get all sweaty and
Mm,
ugly. So I'm like, okay,
yeah.
that's not a hard thing to do for love.
Yeah. They make us better.
Yeah, they do that. We'll say that. Yeah, they make us better. That's a great way to look at it, man. Okay, now
Sure.
we don't want to forget, of course, your other series. You have Underworld. You have one novel in that currently Level Up or Die.
Mhm.
Can you give us a brief like intro into that? With that, is we're not going to mention a lot of it, so I want to make sure
Sure.
people at least know that it exists, though.
Sure. Yeah. Level Up or Die starts out with the guy wanting bacon. He's basically kidnapped by this succubus that is tired of men and basically devouring them. So she comes up with this plan, and him and 19 other people basically they are forced to either level up or die. They're given magic. They're just given these specific talents that are based upon them and or like their secret unlock things that unless a magical creature does something to you in order to unlock it you can't. So now we're in the underworld, and it's literally written just with one thing in mind, and that's fun. I literally had no place that I want to take it except I want to start with a specific concept and just go with it. And it's a ball. I mean, all the different concepts that I've been wanting to try and like kind of developing this world, it's going to be um, like Codename Freedom is in a sense really serious, even though there's a lot of humor between the characters. The concepts, the themes with Underworld is just going to be not over the top necessarily, but there are lot of more humor. Um, and I'll really just want to certain things I want to surprise people with almost in every novel, um, different systems and that sort of thing that just get really inventive with it. And it's also, and I know this is one of those things that, like the overpowered thing, I'm flirting with the line as much as I can, and I'm doing it on purpose. I want to kind of like with Diablo 2 or Diablo, where you level up so much faster, you get so much more powerful than you do in depending on the role playing game or
Right.
massive multiplayer. So I'm like expanding the power scale to a point that seems really unreal even in lit RPG standards, and um, I'm going to try to really manage that where it gets to a point where it's like almost like, oh, um, well, there's standards that are very clear that you can level up often, but of course each level isn't going to mean as much as if there's only 99 levels. So like the progression, basically I can throw some of the training like Codename Freedom into it, and there's just like these little increments that slowly will mean more and more. And I don't know, it's kind of one of those things. It's like my full-on fantasy version of Codename Freedom without any rules that like are really stringent in Codename Freedom. So
I'm sorry, I have to laugh. Like just looking at you like talk, like I feel like you're brainstorming your story as like we're recording. And like I'm like, oh, I can see those ideas passing through his brain right now. Like what he wants to do, like no level caps. Like there's no hard level caps. So the character can do whatever they want to. They can go as high as they want, as high as the story needs to. At the same time, your opponents are gonna adapt like in that Diablo style, like it, it adjusts to your level and your kind of build a little bit. So it still feel like semi-challenging. So like I like Coding Freedom. I like Underworld. I think for different reasons, because again it is a little more light, a little more humorous. There's just more like weird jokes in there, and I like that about it because you can tell like a lot of people don't like this serialized format or like the stream of conscious or like the slice of life format. They for some reason require a plot, like an actual like arc and a plot, like beginning, middle, end, and the end is like full resolution. And I think in our genre, it's one of those things that we don't need that. We were all very used to like reading stuff on a road, like a chapter at a time, a chapter a week or whatever. And so that kind of is translated into like I think the little RPG culture a little bit for people who have been here for a little while.
Yeah.
And that is okay, and that is still fun because a lot of us also have that same experience of like we're used to playing MMOs and there's no real like formal like plot there. It says you go on a bunch of adventures, you have a good time, you stop, and you come back later, and that perfectly still entertaining for us. I think that mentality also plays into like our ability to also not just write but also enjoy like that slice of life story where it's like I'm not really sure where this is going to go, but I'm here for the fun ride.
Oh yeah, definitely the massive multiplayer part. That's a good point. I haven't thought of it that way. Anime is also with slice of life, of course. I mean, it's almost a whole genre for them. But also even I mean, Dragon Ball Z, a
One
lot
Piece,
of the
a lot of those,
just where like there's you're going someplace, but I mean,
it's like One Piece, like they're going to go get that power treasure somewhere. We're episode 3 or 400. We'll get there at some point when maybe the author, like original manga drawer dies. That'll be like the epilogue.
That's right. Yeah. It's awesome. But I think also that's one of the things that it's changed. Like anime has affected. Maybe I shouldn't even go in this because this is a whole topic. But anime's affected, I think, Western fiction and even TV shows because like a lot of the sitcoms, there really wasn't a long-term theme. I mean, I don't even remember any growing up. But as soon as anime really started to kind of have an impact here, like there was all of a sudden, even though each one's its own episode, there all of a sudden were these longer term things. And then you had things like Lost that came in, and you have this long drawn out story. And I think people are more accepting of like the long term slice of life plus a little bit of like this big long plot that's coming, but you don't have to get there right away. And I think it's a huge positive. Not that I don't like plots. I mean, Codename Freedom's definitely more on that end of it. But
the novel version, I'll definitely agree with that. You modified it specifically to have like this more formal structure of like, oh yeah, there's the beginning, there's middle, the end, and the end has like this big exciting battle scene, whatever. So I did notice that you did modify that specifically for that reason, I think, just so it felt a little more traditionally structured, but you still like left room for your other like regular the story that was originally serialized from the Royal Road. And I think that's a very interesting choice because a lot of people will just take their serial story, chop, maybe 3 parts, and then just publish it.
Right.
and you did it slightly. You actually added more content to your story to make it feel a little more, I want to say, I guess, balanced.
Yeah, it's almost, I'd say, well, just under twice as long as it originally was, with 2 books, and, oh, I wanna say that, well, especially this last book,
Yeah,
um, one of the nice things about, like, the standard, uh, plotting system of, oh, what's it called? 3-point, is it 3-point structure? I know I'm saying it
three
wrong.
act structure.
Yes, is you get to that satisfying conclusion,
Yeah,
and Codename Freedom, especially book 2, like, all of book 1, in a sense, was just so I could get to book 2, so I could get to that conclusion because he needed to have that point, and I think, like, if Codename Freedom, like, really takes off, that kind of thing, then book 2 is what's gonna do it. That was kind of always the intention, just because book 1 had to happen. There's just certain things that happened there that had to, but it's almost like the first step to book 2. Um, so it's kind of convoluted compared to the regular 3-act format, but at the same time, that's exactly where we're going.
right. Like when I was reading, I could tell like, oh yeah, because I had read the original, like this is modified for that thing. Like he
Mhm,
knew where he wanted to end book one because that training section in book two was just too long to add in there in book one. That would have made it, oh, I don't know, like 600 or 700 pages, I think, something like that. It's like
mhm,
it's a really long section. In book two,
mhm.
it's like 70% of the novel.
Right.
And that is absolutely my favorite thing. I think a lot of comments that I've read about the stories, like they feel the same way. Like, oh, the
Yeah.
training sequence in book two gives me that Rocky vibe. It's that training sequence I love, and like my boxing anime, I always compare it to like Hajime no Ippo, which is like this amazing
Yeah.
boxing anime. And a lot of that series is just him training for every fight, learning a new skill, focusing on a particular move and like this power up sequence. And you get
Mhm.
that in that exact same vibe and like a very detailed technical level of like not just like weight training and endurance training, but also like an actual weapons training. And I'm like, that must take a ton of research because every time I've read that, and I've read that several times by now in the last few years, it just always stirs my imagination. Like I
Yeah.
can see those hip turns and bringing up that shield when your arm is tired, and just like the extra step in leading your shield so that your body's is always behind it, and your weight's distributed correctly, and you're coming over with your spear
Mhm.
or under the spear to get at a different angle, and all those great things
Yeah.
always pop up in my imagination. And I always acknowledge this, and whenever I talk about your book and this particular one in
Yeah.
particular, like you were the inspiration for why my characters in Adventures in Terra used the spear and shield. And like I loved it so much, man. I was just like, that is an amazing use of those weapons, and like historically, it makes total sense why they would be so useful. And I'm like,
Yeah.
I can tell you, like, even in I'm writing the third book in that series. And even now, the only reason that character has lived through some of these fights is because he has the range of the spear. He has the protection of the shield because
Oh,
he's
yeah.
getting pretty squishy compared to his opponents. And like, but he still has that skill level to like, oh, outmaneuver them and outrange them at least in that respect. There's some of the things working in
Mm.
there, but like that shield and spur stuff is still coming in very handy to keep my characters alive in that story, man. It's always give credit to you for like opening up that particular act. I know in a lot of fantasy and sci-fi stories, it's just the sword is like the main weapon. Like that's the popular
Yeah.
one. Whether it's two or one-handed, like that's you talk about like famous weapons, you think Excalibur, you think a bunch of other weapons, the Maruto like samurai sword. It's never like the infantryman spear, which is like the really powerful one because you can kill somebody from a greater distance before they can get to you potentially.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, and I'm or really, that's awesome that you've been kind of inspired through that, because I mean, a lot of that I'm pulling it from all these different places, and um, it's just, especially with the spear and the shield. I mean, I'm sure you've seen like 300,
Yeah,
like those kind of movies. Probably my favorite movies, and I actually have a film degree. I didn't even go there, but I used to study film. Like, I mean, over and over again, watch the same things and kind of, how would I do that scene?
yeah,
Why was it emotionally impactful? But things like Braveheart, Gladiator, um, that's probably where all of that came from, because really getting to this strategy and that sort of thing, um, that can get so tedious and almost boring.
Mhm.
But if it wasn't for like anime, anything from Ippo, boxing, I can never say the Japanese thing, so I'm not even going to
I
attempt
just
it.
make up my own words. I hope people recognize it.
Yes, yes. So that Naruto, Dragon Ball Z, anything like that, just that um, where there's the training aspect where you're just kind of pushed through. I think that resonates with guys so much that I mean, that's kind of why I think I had to rewrite Codename Freedom too.
Mhm.
Honestly, I probably would have made more money if I just would have posted it originally, because that's like everybody, like you beat me to uh, publishing, and everybody did. And I mean, part of it's because I
Yeah,
have a family, that
it's
kind of
not a
thing. So
race. It's
I
I
know,
know, I know
but it,
exactly. I really do. I felt the same way when Alaron posted and like Travis Bagwell and Blaze post and like Dakota Crown.
yeah.
Like, man, he beat me this year. He put out his novel before I was finished with mine. So I legitimately understand what you're saying, man.
Yeah, so like I feel like one of the old guys, but at the same time, like you guys are my big brothers because you did it first. So I'm still learning from you and like asking questions, and I'm like spying on you online, just seeing, okay, what does he do? How has he handled this? So I mean, thank you guys for that. Yourself, every one of you. Um, that's been awesome, and kind of this community is insanely just amazing.
You know, we're absolutely help. I mean, I think that's one of the things I love about the Liberty community, even in
Mm,
just among the writers, is like we're all very willing to help each other out, like and explain concepts. So, like a lot of us don't actually know how to write. Like we really don't. Like I personally, I don't. I'm not a writer. I was a math, engineering, physics kind of guy in college.
mhm,
I have that background, so like the mathematics of like the RPG systems easy to do, like the actual writing and storytelling stuff and like that stuff. I had to like start studying novels on like writing and like act structures. And that's the only reason I know even some of those words.
mhm,
But it's just talking to other authors and picking their brains and seeing their experiences like an author interview format has been super educational for me on so many levels, not just like on the writing, but also on like the business side of like, oh, maybe you might want to try doing this thing, or like thinking of your economic structure this way or whatever. I'm like,
right.
and just even just like I got an accounting because like, oh, Travis Bagwell said like, oh, I'm a tax attorney. You should
Mhm.
probably get one of those. Just a suggestion. And I was like, oh yeah, that's a good idea, man. Thanks. Because
Oh
otherwise I'd
yeah,
probably be in trouble.
yeah, and
Um,
I mean we're basically part of
yeah.
guilds. I mean the gamer background. I think that's a huge part of why we're tighter than you would be in almost any other community.
Mhm.
It's insane. Well, and that's also why there's some conflict, but that's also fun. So I won't go there though.
Not every family gets together. All the members don't always mesh. It's cool. That's what a family is.
I
And that's okay. We can all still love each
yeah.
other and respect each other, and be there for each other if we need, even if we have issues occasionally. Or you want to fight with somebody. A couple nods from the chat. Want a couple comments. Sean Callan to Succubus Bacon. I think he's saying that's all you need in life. I would say.
Yeah.
I want to say that that's a song like Succubus Bacon. That's all you need. Go. Maybe something Beatle related. I don't know. Dave Wilmer says, in War of Eternius, Evil Ramon was killed. He kills poor Dave, rather. So that's the book. I was a villain. It was Charles Dean. He wrote me in as the mid-level boss villain. I was
Ah.
like a inn owner and a reviewer of food. And he made me the secret villain. So spoilers, guys, if you're gonna read that at some point. It's been out for months, so I think it's okay. But he does kill poor Dave in like a conflict. So he's always sad about that. Dave Wilmar then says, "Rar man stuff, manly men doing manly things." There we go. And Bone Tower says your guild name should be the Porkers,
Hmm.
relating to bacon, I guess. Bacon Guild.
Yes. That brings up a very good point. I love bacon. I also love ranch, and not everybody loves ranch. I know
Yeah,
you do.
I do. I'm a
Um,
big supporter of both. Yeah.
so how do we handle that? Because you have like Charles. He does not like ranch. He's like
Oh, it doesn't? I didn't
bacon
know that.
and cheese. Yeah, he gets onto me. So does that mean that we're like kind of on their same side, but at the same time we're against them? How are we supposed to handle that?
I don't think there need to be, fights in the food wars. If anything, if that anime has taught me anything, it's like food can be for
Mm.
everybody. I'm referencing, of course, the anime Food Wars. But
Ooh.
I love, I love bacon. I can't afford. I still am in this kind of poor man mentality. I think a little bit in that I
Mm.
don't think I can afford bacon very much, but I still buy like cases of ranch every month. I do consume it a
Mhm.
lot. I put it on everything practically. French fries, hamburgers, spaghetti, baked ziti, anything fried. That's my dip of choice, obviously.
Mhm.
So it goes on many things that probably shouldn't for most people. And bacon is always my favorite food. You can go and I think bacon is a great side dish for everything. I can't think of anything particular that bacon won't enhance. And I'm getting hungry now. I can actually feel myself
I
salivating.
know, right? I
Yeah.
shouldn't have said that. Well, actually, it's, chat's fault.
There we go. Chat room did bring up the bacon stuff. It was gonna come in
I
anyways.
love you guys.
In audience questions, we had several for you on bacon themed profiling. So there you go.
Oh, yeah.
So we're going flowing a little bit from the book a little bit. I want to bring us
Sure.
back to that. You have a main character in book one of Codename Freedom, book two, of course, same character, Lucius. Tell
Mhm.
us a little bit about him, what makes him special, and what his superpower is. Because every Little Bit Story character kind of has a little thing that makes them special. What's your character's superpower, and what's about him?
Sure. So one, he kind of starts out as more of a typical lit RPG guy, but in a future setting where like loves gaming, loves VR, is in better shape than he would have been if VR didn't exist, just because he loves that and he loves the competition part. So competition plus gaming, of course, jock slash geek combined. So that's partially me too. But um, he's not necessarily a pro. He's kind of like a semi-pro gamer. He's just getting ready to leave high school, so it's getting time sensitive. And then this opportunity comes. So what makes him special though is um, one, just if he makes a mistake, he learns from it. So he has like a humility to him that's not like on the face or in your face, where he's just like the pushover. But there's a certain, especially in the first book, um, that he ultimately overcomes. He just doesn't give in, even though he struggles with it and kind of get into the introspection. Um, he's not. He doesn't necessarily whine about it either. So there's that fine line that his character, one, kind of had to have, but also um, because he's very logical, I think, just in his thought process. Um, you can follow what he goes through very well, and kind of you almost know that he will likely get there. Um, so you can depend upon like he's ultimately going to pull through. Um, at the same time, though, there's I'd say an aspect of him that oh, how should I even explain it? So
Well, I would kind of describe the
go for it.
character a little bit different. Like he
Go for
has
it.
the strategic mind of the gamer combined with
Hmm.
the um, work ethic of a professional athlete and the determination to succeed despite overwhelming odds. But he also has the mental fortitude to succeed. I think that those are kind of the
Hmm.
key aspects of his personality that allows him to transition from, especially in book one, book two, from just being the gamer who has a bunch of RPG knowledge into like the athlete version that he needs to be to survive in Codename Freedom, which again is very much the realistic aspect of like you have to train, you have to actually learn how to use weapons.
Right.
There's no hotkeys, there's no automatic aiming assistance. If you don't do use your weapon, well, you're just going to be murdered and you're going to die and have to respawn somewhere. Quick analogy from the chat room: looks like Don Chapman has joined us.
way.
she is. She's
And
in London or she's in England. It's like 3 a.m. there for her when we're recording.
wow.
So she definitely was nice enough to stay up and say hello and to hang out with us. She also says bacon in the US is not like bacon here in London or England, where she lives at. And I'd say it is. That is absolutely. I think that's true to like the different cut it is. It tastes just as delicious, no matter how it looks. I think, and it's cooked a little differently. Like the bacon in England, when I was there, a little more wiggly, not quite as crispy, but still delicious. Especially with like tomatoes and beans.
Mm. Is
Good
it
stuff
because
there.
of all the rain?
I couldn't tell you. I think we'd have different respects of it, but it's still bacony goodness. Even if it's not like crispy
Yes.
bacon. So
Oh yeah, I'll eat it. I mean, it
yeah.
can be rare. I'll take my steak that way. I'll take my
Yeah,
bacon.
it can still be like wiggling a little bit. I'm fine with that. You can be like, "See you later, buddy," as you go down my throat.
Yes.
There you go. Okay, let's see. What else we have here? What are you working on at this moment, my friend?
I am working on, well, Saturday, I'm actually going to finally do physical copies of my 3 books. I've been dreading going through the create space formatting, I've just heard, and
Is it a hassle for you?
so I don't know.
Oh, okay. You're assuming
It's
it's a hassle.
the horror stories, and then, I mean, I'm usually pretty good with that kind of thing.
Yeah,
I
no,
am a
honestly, once you
guy,
get your
but
book one is probably gonna be the hardest for you because there are specific things you have to change about like the borders and like the I forget, like they call it gap ranges or something. It's just like changing or formatting a little bit, and you can look it up
mhm,
online, like the specifics, like the best way to like do it in Word or whatever. They're just like different buttons you press and different formatting. But once you get your first formatting set up for your first book, then it's just like
mhm,
copying and pasting the information in. It's much easier for books 2 and 3. There's still like a
right,
little bit of like trial and error adjustments, but it's not nearly as hard. I think it's the sooner you do it, the better it is, because then you can order like what are they called? Like the proof copies or like the author
mhm,
copies at cost, which means you can do book signings, you can send them to fans, and it's just like another way to like
right.
connect to your readers.
Yes, and I've been meaning to do that. It's just one of those things I haven't for whatever odd reason. But next week, Underworld Level Up or Die, book 2, full time into it. I have a little bit already done on it, but it's just that's going to be the focus. And um, I don't know. I'm excited about this one. I have some ideas that, or probably a clearer plot this time too, um, but still fairly slice of life, um, just because some of the quests and that kind of thing coming up.
Like I said, I love slice of life. Your stories can still be very interesting and entertaining. I think I said our genre, I think, is one of the few where it actually still is enjoyable and profitable to write a slice of life story where
Yes.
it kind of meanders and it just goes in this weird direction sometimes, and it's totally cool, and it's absolutely okay for certain segments of the audience. Other segments, of course, they're like, no, I want my regular like 3 act structure. I want a resolution at the end. I'm like,
Yeah.
okay, that's cool. Not everybody's everything's written for everybody, but there's still definitely enough people to, I think, make it a viable option as far as like storytelling goes. Let's see.
Yeah.
A couple comments from chat. Questions about, what would you recommend, CreateSpace or Kindle Direct Publishing? And I'm like, definitely CreateSpace. I tried both, and just on the aspect of like, ordering at cost copies, CreateSpace all the way. And you
Ah,
could potentially do both. Like you can try them out and switch over between, I think. But I CreateSpace, it was just as easy to do either one, but CreateSpace definitely allowed for proofs or at cost copies for the author, which means it's not expensive for me. It's not going to cost me like $30 a book or $50 a book, the
right.
same it would for buy a customer version, and then pay another like 10-15 bucks to ship it to somebody. It's like, it's like
Mhm.
$6 at cost or whatever it costs for you for them to print it. And then like the shipping cost is added on, makes it more reasonable for both
Right.
yourself and for anybody who wants to purchase a signed copy of your stuff.
Mm. Yeah, I love that idea.
There we go. Okay. We have some more questions from like the things I'm going to ask you on the author
Yep.
side of things, and like we talked a little bit about literature already and what drew you into the genre. But
Mhm.
just anybody who's in chat room, please feel free to ask questions. We'll ask them to the author as well. But anything writing, his story related content, things bacon and ranch themed are totally okay as well. Um, But for now, we'll talk about some of the stuff about lit RPG. Like, when did you find lit RPG, and what kind of drew you in as a reader, and what made you change into a writer?
Wow. Well, I can say that I've been writing since I remember in elementary school reading or writing like a 10-page little story that I'm sure made absolutely no, actually I think my mom sent it to me um last year or something. Anyways, I haven't sit down and read it, but I've been interested in storytelling for a long time. Now, of course, it started out sporadic, but I think if I had to credit anything, like the first thing would have been Final Fantasy VII. um, I was already into RPGs a little bit, but being a teenager, whenever that one came out, um, I remember I didn't even have the game. I went over to a friend's house multiple times the week it came out, and I was literally just watching him play. Um, but the storytelling with the RPG elements, just, I mean, I fell in love with it. And
Yeah,
then from then on, of course, I mean, I was already playing RPGs, and then it just really took off. MMOs, I probably played over 50 before a WoW even came out. Once WoW came out, I was actually kind of dried out on them. I was just, because every single one, um,
gets kind of
I know a
grindy
lot.
at some point.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
it really does. But back to kind of the writing part, I would it's hard to credit any specific one that got me into lit RPGs per se, but I would say I was even writing one before Sword Art Online, before I actually got into one. I think back in 2000, maybe, just a story idea, just from playing video games. But it was never serious. I think I got 100 pages or pages into it, and I don't even know where the document is. Um, but Sword Art Online, I know that had a big impact. Just like, oh wait, this can possibly turn into something serious. I know there's other things, not just that, but I was reading other things at the same time, um, and so it was probably around Sword Art Online. I think kind of the same time that you were getting in there,
Right,
and
as the light novel version of it before the anime came out, probably.
mm,
Yeah.
yeah. Um, so one specific fiction I probably can't pinpoint
Okay,
really if
that's perfectly okay. I know we talked about like your journey into RPG, how much you loved it from the gaming side of things, and how you started getting to the word version of like writing first. I have a couple questions from chat that we'll ask at this point. Dave Wilmot asks, "Are you both wearing pants?" No.
no, I'm wearing shorts.
Yeah, I'm wearing shorts as well. Shorts with a nice dress top because that's all you guys see. So that's as formal as I have to get, I guess. But no, I'm not. There you go. Look at him. It's Captain America television or shirt. He says that he wears a geek shirt every single day. I am kind of the same way. So I hear what you're
I
saying
try.
there.
I don't have as many as I want, so I can't, but I try.
Yeah, my wife doesn't let me buy as many as I would want. Otherwise, it'd be like the entire closet.
Yeah. I think Christmas Target usually has like $5 t-shirts.
And there you go.
Yeah. Black
Christmas
Friday.
presents for life. They know what to get you. Let's see.
Yes.
Sean Callahan asked, "Have you ever played a text MMO?"
Yes. So Muds, I'm
Yeah,
trying to
Muds.
think if I even really got into one. Um, like seriously, because I've played a bunch of them. But I remember one of the first MMOs I played was really early. Nexus TK was one of the first. It's a Korean-based one, but it was one of the first that came to the United States that was graphic,
Yeah,
and it was at the time where a lot of the MUDs were still going. Meridian, I don't even remember the number. Um, kind of around that same time. So this one, I mean, I was on dial-up and just like killing it. So, I
yeah. I
mean,
think
that's still
dial
around
up
too.
was like the big like pull of like, oh, Muds works faster and smoother on dial up than
Yeah.
like anything graphic wise. I think that was kind of the draw for their popularity. I think I remember playing
Mhm.
like a couple and just like being like, this isn't as cool as Final Fantasy. I'll go play that because it was very much like you had to imagine everything that was happening, and you could or you couldn't. And for me, it's just I was already into the graphical side of like gaming and like
Mhm.
Nintendo, Mario, so like I was already going in that direction.
Yes, Diablo 2 on dial-up.
Yeah, that was always very
Harsh.
expensive, depending on your AOL plan. I remember seeing ads for that all the time. Like that is, yeah, I can never afford like to play a lot of multiplayer games because of like just the expense of like dial-up internet.
Mm, I forgot all about that. I don't think, especially Diablo 2, I had that problem with the cost part. Man,
Yeah,
can you believe it used to actually cost like per what hour or
it was
something?
like per hour or something at some point. It was like this weird extension of like a long distance plan or something. And it was like, yeah, it was almost like dial per minute. Like I felt like, oh, I'm calling into a naughty number from that I saw on television at 3 in the morning or something. Um,
Yeah.
yeah, so there goes. A lot of comments from the chat room saying dial up, the bane of life, but all the fun. Sean Callan says he loved Diablo 2, spent a shitload on AOL. Yeah, we all kind of have a very similar experience there. So all kinds of great stuff there. On to some of your systems. I'm curious about this as
Yeah.
because a lot of little RPG stuff has like really in-depth game mechanics. And I think I've talked to a lot of people who deal with it a different way. How do you deal with your game mechanics, and how much research do you do like for your story and your game stuff?
Sure. Well, Codename Freedom was probably easier actually, even though there's a lot more stats than you might see in, I guess, a typical one, just because I used to read articles every day, all day, just about um, oh, diet, um, certain just out like how to shock the muscle the best, that kind of
Right,
thing.
and
So
you
I
and
mean,
you
all of
just as part of your
that,
background, you were at the time. I think you said you were studying to be like a physical, a personal trainer or a physical therapist, wasn't?
right?
And so you kind of had this background information on there already.
Right. Yeah. I kind of got lazy in high school. So all the sports, that sort of thing, except for track, I kind of ended up quitting the last like year or something. So I didn't really take it seriously. Then whenever I got serious about it again, whenever I was still kind of young enough and whatnot, I had to have surgery on my knee. I had a meniscus tear, like 7 different micro ones, and they just
Oh,
trimmed it out. So had surgery. It was awesome. It was good for about 15 years, and then all of a sudden, like I have arthritis and that sort of thing. So I literally just can't do that.
yeah.
So instead of like getting into a sport or MMA, that kind of thing, because I was really wanting to do it, it's like okay, maybe like law enforcement. I can still run a little bit. Uh, then personal training kind of came out. The only reason I'm not doing that is because it takes so long to build a following. You can't really make a living. And I was married, like just getting married at the time. So it's
Mhm.
like a big no no. Um, but all the information, I mean, it's still something that, because progression, whether it's in that or in a video game, I mean, one just mimics the other,
Right.
and there's something about it that I really love. But for the more traditional one, like Underworld, that one, I mean, yeah, I have spreadsheets, everything's in there. It's just completely like my system. Um, it probably takes probably Diablo 2 more than anything. Just the not the theme, but kind of the feel, and then goes with it. And then it takes a lot of other things from other games, but I just wanted a faster leveling up system instead
Yeah.
of one of the, I mean, you have a lot of different ones because a lot of us make our own system.
Yeah. We
Um,
mush a lot of things together.
yes, and just I mean, literally what my favorite stuff is.
Mhm.
Um, and that's where it came from.
Perfect. Now, Alex, I want to go back to a little bit to the Codename Freedom version of it because your game mechanics in that particular novel are more based on realism. It's almost like you're gamifying actual athletic training in a kind of a way, in that you're assigning specific numbers and rankings to like real physical training or sports
Hmm.
medicine terms and aspects of like fast muscle twitch, I think called twitch motion, and versus like power training. And there's a bunch of like new terms in there that I had to look up.
Oh
And,
yeah.
and when you see this on your on the first character, you're like, these sound amazing. It very much sounds like, oh, something like Drago, Cal Drago, whatever his name was, who was in like Rocky 3 would get, like all those little
That's
measurements on
right.
his computers that they would be measuring for him, like his explosive power and his intelligence and his ability to remember. You just quantify those, that athletic training
Right.
progression system, differently than they did in other MMOs. And I think that's part of the draw, at least for me, is like, oh, this is a different way of looking at progression. And I think that's one of the things I always love about our genre, is that when somebody's bringing something from their real life training and incorporating it into their story, it feels so authentic. It feels like, oh, you're almost getting like this little minor class on like, oh, this is an aspect of like training or life or virtuality or engineering or crafting, whatever it is, that you
Mhm.
may never got an aspect to in life.
Yeah.
And it grounds your story, I think, a little bit more than other stories that you might have read, because it's based on physical reality, and it's just a different way of looking at that kind of progression like system. And I really did love all the different numbers you use and all the different kind of aspects of like that
Mhm.
physical training. I think like one of the things that makes the story stand out from other little RPG stories is that you have this unique, more realistic version of a progression system.
Sure, yeah, and I'm glad it's accepted as well as it is because, I mean, in one sense, it's hyper real. I have taken liberties in certain things, kind of simplified things, which um, ultimately I think with like mixed reality technology, that sort of thing, we'll literally have something
Yeah,
like that.
yeah,
That
augmented reality,
yeah, I mean,
measurements. Yeah,
it's some of that's not necessarily difficult. I mean, like really studying the muscle fiber, having readings on it, that sort of thing. It's not necessarily easy, I'd say. But at the same time, we're going to get there where you literally can have a GUI that will measure your health and whatnot and certain stats.
no,
And
yeah, we
that's
do.
just, yeah,
No,
that's
we
the
do it now.
personal thing.
We do it with fitness trackers. You have your watches, your Apple watches, all they monitor your health in a certain respects, certain quantifiable numbers like your heart rate, your perspiration rate, all those different things. Just having the whole sensor system and then incorporating into like an understandable, GUI system where you have these stats and you have these numbers that make sense to people, and gamifying it that way. Like I said, again, that's kind of the draw for your show. It's like it feels like
Mhm.
it's talking about a future that's not that far into the future, and so there's a definite real connection to that kind of system. Quick question from Sean Callahan in the chat room. He asked, how do you intend to incorporate stat sheets into your future books? This is more of a technical little RPG question, I guess, because there are
Sure.
a bunch of different versions of like that answer. But I'll let you answer.
Oh yeah. I don't do tables just because one, it's easier really just to make a quick like bullet list and then where it doesn't look like a bullet list, but you can make it very manageable and it just I think it's easier for e-readers and that kind of stuff to handle it. Meaning it's not really necessary. Um, but let me read this question just to make sure. Yeah, stat sheets. Um, so the stats themselves though. In both novels are very I mean like each number is crunched. I don't give everything. I want to make sure that whenever I give a number there's a story thing or as you're reading you're just like I want to see that number. Like so sometimes I'll give a character sheet just because it feels like it's time for it or just part of a character sheet. So I want it to be story motivated, but I also want you to have access to it. So it's that fine line. I don't know if I'll ever find a perfect one. Any of us will because of
Yeah,
the way it is. Um, but of course, now with Underworld, there's going to be a lot more stats than with Codename Freedom to a point, just because it's a whole different kind of story. With Underworld, literally, the the draw is like in an action scene. It's not necessarily even the action, it's just are you using your stats in such a way where you're winning because of your strategy slash how good you built your character.
yeah, your build. Yeah.
Yeah, and I mean that itself, there's a very satisfying part to it. But in Coding Freedom, I mean, your skill, of course, you've built your body. Now, what can you do with it?
Mm-hmm.
So there's like using your wits, that kind of thing. It's not necessarily just crunching the number.
Right.
Um,
It's very much like experiential strategy. Sometimes just
yeah.
luck. Plays a lot of times in like a real fight. And as somebody who's had like martial arts experience, it's one of the things I like about the story is that, oh, I can see the moves. I can see like, oh yeah, that's exactly what you need to do to get into position to do it correctly. And if you're out of balance, it's not going to work. You're going to get knocked over so easily with that like a simple shield rush. And that happens in the story, I think, in Book One a little bit when he's first training. Like he's just off balance. A goblin knocks him out. It's like, yeah, you have to like set your feet right, otherwise you're going to lose in that fight.
Yes.
And all those aspects are absolutely in there. But I think you're right. The two stories do have different focuses of like how their stat sheets relate to the physical reality of their life. Codename Freedom, very realistic, both in the training and in the combat and in the representation of that progression on their stat sheets. Like all those different terms totally makes sense in terms of like actual physical training. In Underworld, it's more traditional, it's more terminal, and those numbers can get super inflated if he's pumping all his like extra stat points, and it has an impact in the story. But it's still very gamified. Like his, if he has like a 200 strength, that doesn't necessarily mean he's going to be the Hulk, right? It's going to be like, oh, he has a higher like carrying capacity. Maybe he hits harder with his weapon, but like in his everyday life, he's not Superman just because he has a high number necessarily. And the same thing with intelligence and all those other stats he has in there. And that game, that story in Underworld is a little more tactical as far as like making sure he's devoting his resources to his build a little bit better and just getting the right abilities. Because in that one, he very much has like this blue mage kind of aspect to his character, which is super cool and very awesome. I love that part of the story. It just feels like, oh, then it becomes a matter of like almost this monster hunter aspect. Like, oh, I got to find the right monster to go get these right aspects in this build, and then becomes a very cool story for at least me and a lot of other readers.
Yeah, that's going to be so much fun. Well, I won't go there. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. So fun stuff there. Question from Dave Wilmarth. Will your characters in future books have to stop and poop in the woods, or is there usual magic cork that keeps everyone poop free? I think these might be different answers depending on the book.
Yes, in Underworld, I mean, all of that is magified or magified. Yeah, there's a spell for it.
Magical poop removal. There you
go. There is toilet paper. There's teeth whitening. There's I think he has the vampire teeth spell. I mean, just almost all of that. I think one of the first spells that the succubus or the mistress gives all of them is like a deodorant. So it's just magic deodorant. You'll never stink. If you do, I'll kill you. So that had to be there. And then, of course, in Codename Freedom, they literally do, but I'm not going to tell you that.
Yes. I think there was a side story about magical poop fairy, or was that the goblin who stole Christmas? Which I still love. Yes. As that is absolutely one of my favorite little side stories that I think I've ever read online. I love the fact that you actually changed the name to the goblin who stole Christmas.
Yes, and that was fun too. I mean, that took an afternoon, which almost wants me to take one of those things, because I mean, I don't write any from like the enemy or from a non-human, but I love that part of the genre. So eventually I think I will, but it might be a side story, maybe a whole different series down the road. Those are fun.
No, that's I was actually thinking about like writing a novel just with side stories for my characters. I have stories for each one of them. Like, oh, maybe something from Adventures in Terror 1, something from Project Alpha, and like something from Adventures in Terror 3. There's like a bunch of like little story nicks that I couldn't reasonably fit into my actual novels. Like they would have added like an extra 100 pages or whatever, and it wouldn't have like advanced the plot very much. They're like, okay, just collect those into like this little Auri Mejia short story collection and just publish them that way. And like, oh, there you go. And that fans get like little extra stories, like maybe in between like 3-act structure, like write 3 novels, put out something like a short story collection, and do 3 novels for something else. And that way gives you a little reading room in between like the main novel series. A couple questions or statements from chat room. They say, Don Chapman says one of her favorite script consultancy jobs was to tell the writer he needed to let the guy out of the boot, the trunk in English or American, out of the boot of his car so he could pee 3 days in a boot. Not happening. LMNAO. So there we go. So it happens in script writing as well.
Yeah.
So folks at home, he wasn't in an actual boot; he was in the trunk of a car, translating into American. There you go. And they also say that they should drink whenever you say succubus. That'd be the drinking game for the podcast episode. Apparently, succubus,
I have
succubus,
tea.
succubus. Yeah, yeah. So, yeah.
I didn't break anything like
No, no,
that.
I
Sorry.
thought that was super funny, by the way, when you were on Drinking with Charles. Like you were the only, like you didn't drink. I was like, oh, that's fun.
Yeah.
Like I like maybe you should have brought root beer or something, and that would have been the thing. I actually did that once on an episode recently. Every day I was drinking, I have a bottle of root beer, and nobody noticed.
That is awesome.
Yeah,
And that's kind of a personal training thing too. I mean, other stuff too, but I mean, alcohol, the amount of calories you get, I mean, there's nothing else really with more calories than that. So,
yeah. No, I was like, I think the last time I'd been in there before that, I drank 2 bottles of like Smirnoff Ice or something, and I got too drunk on air. Like I just started falling asleep
mhm.
because the alcohol had hit me weird or something, and so I wasn't a very good guest. So I decided, okay, the next time I'm going to be on, I'll just have some root beer. It's the same thing. I'll just be more entertaining while they start falling asleep or like getting rowdy.
Yes. Yeah, and honestly, I find I do better with energy drinks than I would with alcohol anyway. So for
Yeah.
your sake, I love you guys.
Yeah, but it's a fun social drink. I get people like it. I'm cool with that.
Mhm.
I've never really drank a lot. I think that might be my downfall. I don't have the tolerance that other people do.
Well, I don't know. It might make you who you are. The reason why you can read 10 books a week and write, let's see, you have 3 novels out. When did you go full time?
I went full time after book 2 came out, and I saw what the sales were going to be. Because I had to convince my wife that this wasn't just a one off. Like with book 1, it did really
Yeah.
well. It did better than anything I've ever written since.
Mhm.
But it really did feel like you did a thing, and then maybe in 3 months you'll get paid for something, because that's how Amazon works.
Yeah.
And so
Yeah, it
that three
does.
month period, even though like it was a nice check, it still felt like, oh, we won the lottery. We'll pay off some stuff, but this will be like a fun little thing with our kids or grandkids.
Mhm.
Hey, your grandpa used to, he wrote a thing, and like the family will talk about it like in Christmas or whatever. Because I realized like, oh no, this can be a living, if this is
Yeah.
repeatable. I didn't want to commit until like I saw like actual repeatable results of like, okay, people just didn't buy book 1 because they felt sorry for me. There's an
Mhm.
actual people willing to enjoy the stories kind of thing going on with book 2, and then of course with a third book, which is entirely different
Mhm.
series, very similar, like reader numbers and purchase numbers. So I was like, okay, yeah, this is a thing. It might not last forever. I'm going to do it now, so I'll take the chance. I'm
Mhm.
going to take the risk, and my life just happened to allow me to do so. But it very much hasn't been like a super long time. I think it's been maybe a year-ish that I've been
Right.
like a full-time author, podcaster, reader. Yeah, so it's been very interesting. Now, speaking of that, I know you are currently a part-time writer, right? So, but
Um, yes, trying to go full time. Basically, whenever the little guy came, I
yeah,
have a new minion,
congratulations on
and
that too, on the air
thank
publicly.
you.
Congrats on your
Yeah.
second kid.
Yeah, so we're trying to power level him, but at the same time, I was able to take off about 2.5 months, which just I was expecting maybe to be able to do it for a month. So 2.5 months kind of blown me away, or blew me away, and able to really write full time right now. So I'm trying to get one. I got Codename Freedom set, ready to go, starting um, really Monday. I'll have about a month and a half, just see how far I can get with Underworld. I'm afraid that that one's just going to turn into a really long book, kind of like Codename Freedom Book 2 did, where, but if I can get most of it or hopefully all of it done, um, the goal is to do it full time. That would be awesome. Even if it's only for a couple of years, depending on how sales go, and um, hopefully, another 80 years.
Yeah, I cross my fingers the genre stays this fun and interesting, and that the readers
Yeah.
continue to buy stuff in the genre. Because I mean, heaven knows, like I always look at urban fantasy and
Hmm.
steampunk as like examples of like niche communities that started out very small and tight, but then as they got wider and wider, the genres just caught saturated with
Hmm.
sometimes subpar kind of things, and it became less viable for people to just do full-time writing gig, and like for like now or even like a little earlier, it was like the prime time. Like, oh, just jump in and do a thing and try it out, and maybe you can
Yeah.
make a living off of it, or at least pay a couple of your bills. And I think we're slowly like getting more and more people who are just like kind of seeing, oh, that's a thing now. Okay. Um,
Yeah. Well, and also I think there's literally tens of millions of people that have played MMOs and
yeah,
loved them.
yeah,
Role playing games. There's a huge untapped group of people that I think could really fall in love with it, but for some reason it's kind of a hard sell. Like video games meet novel. I
yeah.
mean,
It very much is. I think along the lines of like, oh, video game and movies. Like, I've seen some of those. They never turn out well. Why would a novelized version of like you playing your WoW game do it? I think this experience happened when we were at Dragon Con last year,
mhm.
just because it very much was a sales pitch. Like I had to learn how to like within like 3 words sell every one of those guys' novel series, and
Oh
it was always like,
wow.
oh, it's Ready Player One meets World of Warcraft, or World of Warcraft meets Game of Thrones, or something like that, or just like and those like few words would catch people's attention verbally, like, oh, and they'd come by saying, oh, game stuff. I like video games. Like, oh, well, you'll love our genre because it makes you feel like you're playing your favorite MMORPG you're reading. And as an older gamer, I don't have a lot of time anymore, but this story
Right.
gives me that same vibe, that same love, like game mechanics, but it incorporates great storytelling at the same time. But it is kind
Mhm.
of a hard sell just looking at it or like hearing the name Lit RPG. Um, so there is some educational aspects that do need to be
Right.
done if it's going to be like a very mass market kind of audience.
Yeah, and I don't know if you want to go there, but that's one of the reasons why, whether you like the movie or not, Ready Player One, it's just one of those things I can point to this and be like, yeah. And
Yeah, no,
honestly, I went
definitely.
with
I will
like,
save that question for a little bit because I have it as
okay,
an audience
yes,
question for me at the end. I want to actually pick your brain about Ready Player One, what you thought of, because I know
okay,
you saw it today, right?
yeah, last night.
We'll see what you think of it in a little bit. I have a few more like just basic writer questions. So right now your day is structured a little bit different than it would normally. What would your like your normal when you have your full time job day structure be for writing?
It used to be um, just try to get off as early as possible because there's a lot of voluntary time off depending on the time of the year and that sort of thing. And then I'd take that time and I'd literally just, I wouldn't go home. I'd sit there at work with my laptop and write. So sometimes, I mean, I was averaging 4 hours a day. Sometimes I was getting 2 hours a day. Sometimes there'd be 2 weeks where I wouldn't be able to, so I'd have to write late. So it was pretty sporadic, but there were stints that were really consistent. Um, Before voluntary time off, everything was at night. So I just, I'm not a night person. I know that's weird being an author, so strange, I guess. But like whenever I'm up ready to go in the morning, I can go 8 hours and just like pour into it. My mind's like into it and I enjoy it so much more too. Um, so of course now I get to do that. I've only been doing it for a couple weeks and it's crazy. Um, so I'm super jealous of you.
Oh, I wish I'm jealous of you, and your ability to write for 8 hours. I, I don't think I have enough time because I'm always reading something. But I
Oh
mean, I
yeah.
schedule out time to write first thing in the morning. But then as soon as I finish, 3 or 4,000, 5,000 words or whatever, and I finish my chapter, I'm like, okay, I know I have 10 books to read in a week. So
Hmm.
I devote a significant amount of time, even as like a full time author, to reading
Yeah.
little RPG stories and doing reviews and preparing the podcast, which is like a whole day. Like, that it kind of eats
Hmm.
on Thursday. So, God, that you can do that for 8 hours. I'm like, that is super admirable, and I absolutely admire that you can do that. Even if right now it's a temporary time that you have that time, and you're taking advantage of it so much. I'm like, good for you, man. Good, like really, like that's really awesome. I have to say. What kind of writer are you? I generally like categorize people like on a spectrum, like, oh, outliner to pantser, like that free
Right.
flow thought kind of thing. Where are you on that spectrum?
Good question. I am definitely a mix, and probably the best way I explain it, I always have snapshots of big moments. I start with big moments. I always know where I want to basically end. Um, Not so much in Underworld, but I mean, there's always the big moments. There's the big scenes. I know probably 4 books from now where I'm going with both. Well, honestly, with Codename Freedom, I probably know 9 books in exactly where I want to go. But I've been working on that one for years. Um, so big moments. So I kind of outline those. I outline the moments, and then if there's certain logical steps, I'll put those in there, and then I'll start there, and then I'll discovery write, or I'll basically um, pants. But and then I'll kind of go back, and then that outline is so fluid. But I do the logical steps. So it's definitely I think a logical mix though. I think a lot of us kind of do that, even if some people get more detailed with the outline.
Mhm.
But um, I mean, and anyone that's interested in kind of learn more about that, Brandon Sanderson's his lectures on YouTube are awesome.
Yeah, they are. I actually really enjoy those because they explain a lot of the concepts that you may be thinking of naturally if you've been storytelling your whole life or like watching television and reviews or reading books,
Hmm.
and can some degree probably picked up like things about the story like pacing or like the 3 act structure subconsciously, but he definitely helps you understand specific writing concepts. I mean, it's an actual class on writing that he puts up
Yeah.
online, and those are the lectures he uses. So that makes sense. But I would definitely recommend those for anybody who wants to improve their, it's like the technical aspect of the writing stuff.
Hmm. Yeah, and it's not a creative writing class. I think a lot of times creative writing class, it's almost tragic that they don't just give you these logical tools,
Yeah.
especially guys. We need a certain amount of structure and just tell us what we can do, and then our creativity, our imagination will take it from there. If you don't give us that, like those certain guidelines, I mean, you just tell me to go write something and I don't really know what I'm supposed to do with it. I don't know if I want to. Um, but I mean, I don't have that problem anymore. But yeah, it's those are extremely helpful, and I probably mention those to someone once a week. Um,
Yeah, like definitely, I would say some for some people, just starting the writing process is like the hardest. Like once you start
mhm,
typing, even if it's just like a bunch of junk, or like just like this word opening, um, the rest of it kind of comes as your like brain focuses on like what you're
mhm,
trying to describe, and your fingers hit the key or your hand on the pen or paper, whatever it is. A couple of comments from chat room. Don Chapman says Scrivener and Aeon timeline for a long series. Best thing you ever
mm,
do, Apollos. I only know what one of those words are, Scrivener. I use that program as well. I don't know what an Aeon timeline is, if it's a program or like a writing technique. We'll have to look it up because you look as confused as I am. Dave Walmart says he started with an outline, and then his character Brick used part of it as toilet paper, and then Fimble burned the rest. So
I believe him.
yeah, I do too.
Oh man,
Very
yeah.
good stuff.
Thank you, by the way, Don. I've been wanting to go to Scrivener, but I'll probably really get into it if I can go full time. So I'm scrambling to get as much time writing as possible, and then if I get there, then we're good.
Oh, okay. So she explains in the chat, it works with Scrivener. It's a fully integrated timeline to help plot. Oh, I just
Hmm.
use Excel for that. I'll have like a full on like page for timeline stuff, and hopefully, but maybe it helps people like organize their thoughts and like the stream of like,
Hmm.
oh, this is the time for the book, this is the days and the months, and so here are the plot lines. I can see the working. I think I might have heard of it before. I don't think I've ever used it though. So
Hmm.
and Scrivener is a
Yeah,
great tool. I don't probably use it to its full effect personally, but it's a nice tool.
sure.
Let's see. Okay, a few more writing questions. What's the hardest and the easiest thing about writing for you?
Hardest. Whenever I've been gone from doing it for a while or gone from a certain story to get back into the characters and just the flow. Um, I don't like being away from it just because I do love writing. Um, so I don't like that feeling because you don't feel um, like whenever you're really in it, whenever you're writing and you're just doing what you're supposed to be doing, it's almost like you're just sitting there. experiencing the story as it goes, and somehow it ends up on the computer. Um, so really just that lack of or being away from the story, which is kind of hard because I do two series, but I do that on purpose too, just because I have a silly one and then I have a really serious one, and it keeps me sane.
Right.
So try to do that on purpose. Um, so that's easily the hardest part. The easiest thing though, um, is, oh, kind of coming up with new ideas, which, I mean, especially if I had the ability to write as fast as I, you know, could to get everything out. Um, I mean, I have a vampire series that I already have like the first book written from years ago that I'm not sure, because of course the training aspect, I have some very interesting thoughts on that that I think will have to be done one of these days. The zombie series, all of those different geek things. Um, I almost have a different one for each one. And I mean, each one's like there's that uniqueness between Codename Freedom and then Underworld. They're just completely different. And I think each one of those are literally just that different. Um, so that's the easy part, like coming up with this stuff. Um, yeah.
Okay, those are good answers, man. I know it's late for you, and I know you've had like 3 hours sleep with the baby and everything. So
I'm
uh,
used to this
yeah,
time.
yeah. So like, it's okay. You can finish questions. It's
Good.
fine. Writer's block. Any tips for? Have you ever had writer's block? What are you
Um,
doing about it if you have?
I don't really struggle with that too much. Now, there's sometimes that I just don't want to write, which I
Yeah,
don't consider the same thing at all. But that's because if I'm too tired, kind of like I was mentioning before, if I'm just not getting a lot of sleep, which of course I'm not, and it's late, like I wouldn't probably be able to try to sit down and write right now. Well, I could right now, but I know about 11:30 I'll just hit a wall.
right.
Um,
It's like your brain
but
stops working. You find yourself staring at the computer for like the last half hour. Yeah,
yeah, or of course, and I know all of us writers struggle with this, you start to think about a different book or a different series, and you're like, I have to get something about that scene
yeah.
down, and I'm trying to do this other thing. So you basically have to go outline something or put
Yeah.
something down
Yeah.
just
I
for
have a
me.
whole special like different document that has like different story ideas, like just a bunch. Like, oh, this is a great idea for this other series that I can't put in here. But like this sounds like it sounds really I knew exactly what you mean, man.
Yeah, if
Yeah.
you're emotionally like connected to something at the moment, I think it's important not to lose
Yeah.
that too, just
I do.
because, yeah, if you're connected, usually the readers will be more connected, and
Hopefully
so,
as well. Yeah.
but
For me, it's never been writer's block as much as been like writer's not motivation.
yeah,
Like especially at the end of a novel, like that last like 20% of it, I always feel like I'm like so tired of writing. Do I have to finish this? Like, you have bills to pay. Yes, you do. And that's always like the motivation. Like, you're a full-time writer. This is your job now, man. You can't just give up because it's not coming together and being interesting. So a lot of like
yeah,
recently is like finishing a book three, Adventures in Heroes. I've been making the story interesting enough for me to write, in addition, like, because I my original outline has a section, right? And 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 I wrote the beginning of the novel, but going through it, it's like when I finally get there, I'm like, this doesn't feel as interesting anymore. So I've had to like change it a couple of times, or like make it more interesting, or like change the game mechanics so that it still feels fun and fresh. And I think that's kind of the downside of like being an outliner, is that your story isn't as surprising to you
mm,
as it hopefully could. It feels very like, oh, I know what's going to happen, and it's not as exciting or as a surprise for you as an outliner, because you've plotted out what's going to recur there. So if you can
mhm,
still put in some pantsing, I guess we'll call it, just like some stream of thought,
yeah,
conscious, like kind of writing in there still to surprise yourself, whether it's with like cool dialogue scenes, which is like these special little scenes where it's like, oh, I hadn't realized
mhm,
that conversation was going to go that direction, or like this particular relationship, and that changes what your story does. I think that's still a good way of like keeping it fresh for you as a writer, because
oh yeah,
it's one of those things, like, if you get bored with your series, your readers are going to tell, like, they're going to get bored with your story too, because they're going to recognize in your writing that you're just not as enthusiastic as like you were at the beginning potentially.
oh yeah. Well, and I think part of at least for me, a lot of times the book will kind of write itself, and I just have to make sure that I do the work. That if I see plot holes, that kind of stuff, that a lot of times you'll even know what you really need to do to fix things. Um, and I think that's where one of the big distinctions, and this isn't just me, this is just like looking at the genre since it's so young. One of the big differences between successful books and non-successful is one person just does the work, not necessarily on the editing side either, more on the story side. I mean, editing's definitely really, really close related though. And one person doesn't, they kind of throw up their rough draft, and it might still be kind of entertaining, which some of those, I mean,
Yeah, they
Royal
can be
Road,
in that
right?
direction. Yeah.
um, but there's I always encourage everyone, just do the work, because if you don't, I mean, one, you're kind of leaving money on the table. um, but I mean, you're just not doing what you're putting all this effort into justice. um, I will throw out just kind of a side note, I hate editing.
I think
I
I
hate
think
it.
that's a general feeling of like most writers at some point. Like I edited my first book myself, and it was just such a pain in the butt, like to go over it 7 times and use
Yeah.
different programs, like using I forget what I use anymore. But like
Mm,
a bunch of different programs, the regular one for Word, and then one in Google Docs, and then like some other stuff like these, like the other professional like editing tools. I forget
mhm.
their names of it anymore. But like I just pay somebody. I'm like, I'm more than happy to give somebody money
Really, yeah.
to not have to do that myself. That it just gives you so much more time to write yourself,
Mhm.
than like to focus on like grammar and spelling and maybe even like some plot points like for developmental editing. But still, getting the words on the page is like the author's job, like setting up that story. That to me is not just more freeing for your mind, but it's also like more profitable long term. Like speaking with other authors, like especially like um Michael Scott Earl or Michael
Yeah,
Chatfield, like they put out like 12 books a year. And the
yeah.
only way they can do it is by having this system set up
Mhm.
where they'll write their novel in 2 weeks. They'll send it off to beta editors and alpha editors like another 2 weeks, and then regular
Mhm.
editors. And then by like that like fifth or sixth week, that thing's ready to go. Like their
Yeah,
artwork set, the second editing has been done. It's sitting on the table. So like every 6 weeks or whatever, like the new novels ready to come at the same time. Like the second and the third book are already in those second and third phases of that editing process, and like that's an amazing thing if you can get it down.
yeah. Yeah, they're an inspiration, and, shout out to beta testers. I mean, I think our genre has some of the best, just I mean, they're gamers, they love it, and, like, on my shout out page in the books, you guys are awesome.
Yeah,
Um, Ramon, you and I probably even use some of the same ones. Yeah,
yeah.
I mean,
Jay
makes a
Taylor
huge
and the
difference.
crew. So yeah,
Yeah.
lots of really good folks. A few comments in the chat says Sean Callan says, I've heard you should stop writing when you're on a high. I'm assuming a writing high, not just like a high. It keeps momentum and energy. You come back the next day on a roll. Dave Warmer says, Pantser, I generally write pants free. That's cool, man. Thank you for that little insight into your writing schedule. Don Chapman says 5 a.m. to 9 p.m. some days, 6K goal, but more if possible. Some days 10K plus. I can push, but it does mean a slow day after. Ha
Mm,
ha ha ha. 10K plus is you are insane. So there you go. I can't write 10K either. I know Michael Chatfield does sometimes though, but he's a beast. As
yeah.
is Michael Scott. Those guys write a ton of stuff. So like good for
Mhm.
them. Let's
Yeah.
see. Self-publishing versus traditional publishing. Which one have you chosen and why?
Yeah, so definitely self-publishing,
Yeah.
and I mean, what if I ever get a series or a specific book that's popular enough, I'll probably try to sell just the physical copy or physical book rights to one of the big six or something like that. But I mean, I think you have to have something like 50,000, 100,000 sales. I haven't researched that in a long time, but in order for them to even look at you.
Right.
Um, so that kind of thing. But honestly, with the indie editing, with Kindle Unlimited, just the way the genre is set up, I think it'd almost be crazy in a sense to do traditional.
Yeah,
Um,
because you give away a lot of your royalties, you give away your rights to your stories and your characters. I'm like, there's more drawbacks to me at this point
mhm.
for traditional than indie.
Yeah, and I mean, we kind of live in this age where the first time in history you have things like Royal Road, and then you have indie publishing where you can literally love video games, go to a website, start to write stuff and put it on there, and then you can publish your stuff and possibly make a living doing it.
Yeah.
It hasn't
Yeah.
been possible historically. I mean, it's just it hasn't. So, I mean, like the blessing there, that is awesome. Um, I
Yeah,
mean,
that story is super common within our genre. I like specifically that exact story where like a lot of us will start at
yeah,
testing. We're just like throwing up stories on War Road or other platforms, Wattpad or whatever. And
mhm,
you got a following. Like what people are going to actually read this and they comment and you're like, oh, they
yeah,
totally read this and they found my spelling errors or they found they found my potholes. And then but it's a way to work in your craft for free. They get
mhm,
content, you get feedback, and you get a chance to like stretch your literary legs. And then at some point you decide, oh, I can actually put it on another platform where they will sell it and they'll take a cut, but I'll also make a good majority of the profits depending on how you set it up. And like whether
mhm,
it's Amazon or Google or Apple, whatever it is, Amazon being the dominant platform at this point for us at least. There's no real gatekeeper saying you can't do this or you have to meet
right,
this particular standard or like there, because I understand the traditional platform of being very selective, because they're investing a ton of money into promoting you in a crowded space for physical copies, but
mhm,
the indie space, it doesn't have that same setup. Like it doesn't cost you
right,
anything besides like your time to write the story to put it up on Amazon. I mean,
mhm,
fundamentally you don't, like they even provide like free covers that you can edit
yeah,
in space and use for your cover art. So there really is like no gatekeeper saying you can't put your thing up. Like the market will decide, the readers will decide whether it's a good story, whether it's bad, or whether there's a readership for it. That's
yeah,
also exists. But your opportunity and your ability to do something and to kind of control that introductory aspect of it is up to you. Like you want to put in the hard work, it is hard work. Nobody says it isn't, but there's nobody stopping you from doing
right,
that thing that you want to do.
yeah. It's incredible. Because I mean, if you just think about it, 50 years ago, it wouldn't have even been
Yep.
possible. I
Yep,
mean,
absolutely not. And like I said, I think our genre only exists because of the conflation of all those different aspects, like the fact that
yes,
virtuality is popularized. We have a gaming culture and a nerd culture that's becoming acceptable. A lot of us have gamers when the Nintendo Entertainment System was introduced in the 80s. Anybody who played that kind of became a gamer, and
mhm,
that age group are adults now, adults with disposable income. In a lot of ways,
yeah,
and they became MMO players and RPG players, and all those grown-ups are here as consumers and readers and even writers, and that's kind of the generation and group that we're attracting and we're appealing to with our writing styles, and this particular genre in particular, it draws on those same kind of nerd cultural vibes, and the platform has allowed us to be the writers and to be the content creators, and at the same
yeah,
time as being like nerdy consumers at the same time. I do know that I think you didn't do self-publishing for your audiobook though, right? For Survival Week 1.
right,
How was that experience?
yeah,
I think you used Podium Publishing. How did that
mhm,
work out for you?
yeah. They've been really good. Them and Tantum, I think, very similar. Podium, they just came to me first. I talked to Luke, and I mean, his argument was perfect for me. Just they're going to do all the work. I don't have to get involved. I can spend my time writing, which that in itself, since I've struggled, finding hours here and there, it was perfect for me. I mean, in the future, new series, I've signed both Underworld, which is probably coming out fairly soon, I think in May or something, um, and then Codename Freedom. So, for probably the next couple of years, I'm going to use them for everything. I may try like Jeff in the future for something because I love his work,
Yeah,
but it just that part makes it so much easier. I mean, that's the thing with traditional publishing. If you can find it, um, there is that easy aspect to it, where they do certain things that you just
yeah, they do
don't
everything.
have to.
Yeah, you write the
Yeah,
thing, they'll do all the other work, and so in a very real sense, it's easier, because you're just handing off your project to someone and they'll do all the audio production, they'll find the hiring, they'll do the editing for it, they'll have people like go over to make sure it sounds good,
right.
um And the same thing with like publishing. It's like they'll do the editing, all the good stuff. But you as a consumer, it's easier, but it's also just don't make as much. Like they make the majority of the royalties from your work. And so it can still work out really well for you if you're a
Mhm.
big success. If you're J.K. Rowling, I don't think she's ever complained that she went with the
Yeah.
publisher, right? No, same thing with Stephen King. He never complains that he didn't go indie. But that's a much bigger space and audience than I think that we have in the community at this point. So like
Yeah.
keeping most your royalties as an indie creator makes more sense to me, even on the audiobook side. But I do understand that it's easier to just say, hey, here's my stuff, go do a thing with it, send me a check. And that's
Mhm.
totally valid. And it works for a lot of people.
Yeah. Yeah, it certainly does. Although, kind of side note, Stephen King, Brandon Sanderson, 5 years ago, I probably wouldn't have ever said this, but like those guys, they write so many books so often. Would they be able to make as much money indie publishing as they do traditional publishing? I don't think
Yes.
it's there yet,
Yeah.
but it's getting to the point where, I mean, because you have a Brandon Sanderson that doesn't publish like a Michael Scott Earl, but I mean, he he's one of those insane writers. He goes
I
and he
think
goes and he goes.
I think they could. I mean, honestly, I think they have enough of a following just on their name recognition alone that if they decided to, I think the already established their own publishing company, but it'd be kind of the same thing, like
Yeah.
organizing your editors and whatever. I think they could be really super. I think they would probably make more money. It would be more work
Mhm.
for them.
Right.
Obviously, just same way it would be more work for us. They'd be starting their own business essentially. But I would try. I actually believe that they could do it as indie publishers and they would make more money than they do as handing it off to somebody and just like focusing on the writing stuff. I
Right.
think the system is in place for people to do really well if they're, again, essentially small entrepreneurs in organizing all the stuff that you need to cover art, editing, line editing, development and editing, all
Oh
that
yeah.
other stuff. If you're going to invest your money and your time into it in doing really well, all the tools are there. It's just it's a lot of effort. It's a lot of hassle for a lot of
Right.
people, and not
Oh
everybody
yeah.
wants to do that, and that's totally okay.
Yeah.
Okay, marketing. Any marketing advice for people?
Marketing advice.
Yeah.
So one, um, if you don't have a series, I probably wouldn't do free books. I just
Yep.
haven't had no luck with it. I've tried and I kind of put some money aside just so that one, I can get used to it. I think everyone probably spends a couple $100 just getting used to it before they're successful at all with the marketing, except for just like regular Amazon marketing with your books. That's pretty easy. I don't think I've had, especially with Kindle Unlimited. Um, that's probably the one thing I'd recommend. Facebook, I haven't messed with it a lot. I know some people swear by it, some people don't. Um, the biggest thing for marketing is write more books. Just publish, then publish, then publish. Um, with the way Amazon kind of does all the marketing for you whenever you
Yeah.
publish a new book, if you can get one out like Michael Scott Earl or Chatfield, I mean, you're going to kill it unless people just hate your stuff.
Yeah.
Um, but I mean, they kill it every time. So
Yeah.
yeah, that's
Yeah, kind of the same concept. Like, I don't know much about marketing. Like, so I'm always surprised that, I think I'm the marketing tool for a lot of people. I like the Little PG podcast because I'll
mhm,
talk about everybody's work, whether it's good or bad. If it's just Little PG, I will at least give you some press in the podcast
yeah,
or as a review, and that's totally free to you, obviously, as like an indie writer. And I think that I kind of have that role for a lot of people. But like
mhm.
I've done Facebook ads and at Amazon, like with varying results, but like I also don't know what I'm doing, and I've had other people say, oh yeah, they have their thing down and they make like 2 or 3 times return on whatever they're investing in their marketing on Facebook or Amazon. I'm like, how do you do that? Is that a special formula, or are you sacrificing virgins to some marketing god? It's always been like my asking question.
Mhm.
So yeah, there you go.
Yeah, I don't know.
Yeah, see, I don't know. We don't, either one of us really know. And Don Chapman says her advice is to 100% write more. She says you can go ask her privately if you actually want like actual advice with, if you need a hand with keywords, etc. Shout me. It really works. I feel like that's almost like an ad, but I know she's being like super nice and generous. She's a very nice lady.
She's awesome.
Yeah, she is.
She is.
Okay, on to some questions from the audience. Dun, dun, dun. I'll add in some pictures later.
Oh.
Yeah. Uh, okay, questions from the audience. We only have a couple because we kind of did this at the last minute. I think you gathered most of these questions actually. So if there's anybody in chat room who actually has questions of any kind, put them in now. We have some here, but we also always want more for him or even for me. I think Apollo said he actually had questions for me at some point, so we'll get to both of those.
Yes.
We'll start with Cameron C. He asks, he's curious about what else you do besides writing. He says his first question is, what led you to start your writing? And we'll start with that first. What led you to start your writing?
Sure. Um, of course, kind of went through it already. I guess I've even answered it because I knew it was coming, so I probably failed in that. I should have saved some. But primarily, starting writing was just a love of geek culture, love of things like Sword Art Online, a lot of the just different things on Road. That website has, I think, almost like spawned this. I don't know if they're fully responsible, but I'd give them like 80%. I don't, there's so many people that read over there and kind of, really got started on,
Yeah,
not
I definitely
necessarily
think
the
it's a good
rush.
place that people kind of cut their teeth on like writing in general because it's a free
Mhm.
platform. People read, and people are okay with like crappy work. I'll say it that way,
Yeah.
because it's a learning process for everybody. Nobody becomes even a decent or halfway decent writer without like failing and like like doing that first. Like nobody grows without like change and failure.
Oh yeah. But also, I've wanted to write for a long time.
Yeah,
I've wrote for a long time. I have a film degree, and kind of where I really got serious or more serious with writing was um, with screenplays. Not like Don. I mean, I've only written a couple, but after I wrote like screenplays in the class where we had to, I went through a couple, storyboarded some things, and then I'm just like, I've written a lot in the past. I'm just going to go novel, and ended up going into that. But just that love for storytelling um, with movies, 3-act format, know really well just because that's everything is based upon that. And um, then taking anime and how they don't use it at all, or they like mix up the aspects.
right.
I love those kind of things. Um, and what happens to the characters. And so basically, I think ultimately I was going to end up writing anyways. It's been like in a way that I never expected. Um, I
No,
never expected I'd really
it's
go
always
full time
surprising when people were like, you wrote a
close.
thing and they read it. I think that the experience of a lot of writers in our community, they just
Mhm.
had a story, they put it out there, whether it's good or bad, or like on a technical level, but people read it and they're like really surprised, and so
Yeah.
they keep working at it because they get that positive reinforcement saying, "Oh, we like your story, even if your writing kind of sucks. Please keep going." And that's especially the case on Royal Road, where there's a really large I'm going to say encouraging community, but it's
Hmm.
also a very critical community, which is helpful
Yep.
for writers in a lot of ways because people are willing to say, point out and say that sucks or that isn't correct. But they'll also
Yeah.
add suggestions saying, maybe try it this way, or maybe it should be written this way and try how that sounds to you. And so it's a really good free learning opportunity in a lot of ways. I think it's what a lot of us did, but the community as a whole is like, oh yeah, very welcoming, like new people. And like maybe
Mm.
their technical writing skills aren't amazing, but their stories are just so compelling, or their game mechanics are so fresh and new. And I think we're a very unique community in that respect, and that we're willing to accept like less than stellar and perfect writing skills in
Oh yeah.
exchange for like amazing stories that we just want to like dive into for like 20 books.
Hmm.
Perfect.
Amen.
Okay. Next question
So,
before I get too off a base. He asks, is there some kind of specific background that comes out in your writing extremely well?
yeah, and um, I think with the rest of this question, I think he really was pinpointing like the training aspect and everything with Codename Freedom book two, and the bodybuilding type thing or the personal training. Um, honestly, I don't know if I ever would have got into that as much as I did if it wasn't for role playing games, believe it or not, because of the progression and my love for like those systems. I remember, as a teenager, my friend and I would go see like 3 movies a day, and we'd take like the magic systems or kind of like what was in the movie, and then we're taking the video games, we're taking the movies, and we just talk about like basically making a video game all day.
Right.
Um, and I'm sure that's a huge aspect of it. But if it wasn't for that physical side, the training part, just all the different sports and stuff I played, it wouldn't be possible because literally you can take a lot of the principles in Codename Freedom, really one and two, and make a workout
Yeah.
um, routine, kind of take certain principles with the
Yeah. I
diet.
thought about it for
Now,
like half of a second, like maybe I should train like this guy. Then I'm realizing
no,
this is
you'll
real
die.
life. I'm gonna die. Yeah.
Well, and I mean, there are certain liberties that I took, especially with the extent. I mean, hopefully it's obvious that it's fiction,
Mhm.
um, just because if you even tried to do
Yeah.
that much, probably
There's
in
a
one,
hardcore Spartan, like, Mr. Universe kind of training schedule.
yeah, and I mean, even like 2 days in football, I remember, I mean, I was in shape and I couldn't handle it. So doing like 5 different, no, don't do it.
Yeah,
Um,
please. It's remember, this is fiction. This is like anime. Don't do the Dragon Ball Z training schedule. Don't do this one in real life
yes.
unless you happen to be a Super Saiyan.
Right. Now, the principles that are used with training, those are good. So, just like um, different aspects of there's, building muscle or a certain kind of fiber, fast twitch fiber, as opposed to the low twitch, whatever. That kind of stuff you can take.
Yeah.
Um, but there's a lot more you can learn about it. How those, I mean, there's like mix. So,
Yeah. So I'm
um,
going to definitely say that your background in physical training and in sports definitely plays a big part in it, especially in book 2 of Codename Freedom, but also your work as a gamer in general helps build all these great systems, especially in Underworld. But I want to say also your background in film really does play a part in how you're choosing to describe your scenes and how you're doing your writing. Because again, one of the things I keep coming back to is like in Codename Freedom 2, especially the training scenes have such a visual quality. Like I could literally see every one of those movements you're describing, and it was a very cinematic kind of way of like describing these training systems. It really did remind me, like, oh, Rocky, all the Rocky movies, like when they have those scenes and how they're incorporating them into this almost like small sub storyline of like, oh, this progression system of also with these cooldown period in between like training sessions where it's still like
right.
developing character arcs and developing like storylines and plot points. It very much, like I said, reminded me of like Hajonipo or Rocky or like some anime stuff where those are very much like core like script storylines. And I think, like I said, the visualization of those scenes was very spot on for me and impactful because I could see those movements, I could see those combat scenes very much in my mind.
Awesome. Yeah. And I'm glad it actually comes out that way. Because I don't even know how I learned that writing style. I guess, I mean, part of it's just the way my mind works because of that background, I'm sure, but um, action in itself can be so, um,
It's a very challenging thing, I think, because I,
yeah.
I run into the same kind of concept. Like, I remember writing a martial arts scene in Adventures in Terror book 2, where I have a slight martial arts background,
Mhm.
and just I incorporated like unarmed combat systems and like throws and like actual training. Like my main character trains his cobalt friend in unarmed fighting and martial arts sides, and there's a whole
Yeah.
kung fu
Yeah.
goofy storyline, like there's a whole drunken master thing in there at some point, but it all very comes from
Nice.
like there's a very fine line between, oh, making this entertaining and making it technically correct. Like when you
Hmm.
have a background in like something you're writing about, there's always that temptation, like, oh, I need to make this so correct and so detailed because otherwise I'm not going to be satisfied for it. It's not going to seem real to me. And you can do that, but a lot of people are going to be bored of that. And that was my commentary from like some of the beta readers from my alpha reader. My wife, she's like, "This is so really detailed. I don't care about all this stuff." and so like trimming
Right.
some of the detail out, like, oh, the exact foot movements placement in relation to your other foot and your balance, and like
Yeah.
right below your hips, and like you having, certain movements, like that's a lot of text, and it doesn't really add to the excitement of the fight necessarily, the excitement of the training. So like, so it's really, I find that precise thing being happening in like your combat scenes as well, like balancing between like being punchy and being technically correct is a hard thing to do.
Oh yeah, and I mean it's almost like you need to give snapshots. That's
Mm.
kind of what I focus on, where there's going to be a logical progression. You're not going to be able to give everything because exactly what you just said. It just gets so.
And sometimes you got to do a little one waving, otherwise your main character dies.
Yeah.
Especially if you're like doing dice rolls. I know Dakota Kratz are the same. Like, I do actual dice rolls when I do my combat scenes and my descriptions. I'm like, how many times has your character almost died? He's like, a lot. It's like, it's just sometimes
Wow.
things go that way with actual dice rolls. I'm like, yeah.
Yeah, that. Yeah, I don't have a system like that just because. Yeah.
Yeah, chance and
I
coincidence.
haven't gone there.
They're murderers
Yeah.
for characters. Yeah. They are. They're the biggest murderers. Like the bad dice rolls have killed so many more tabletop characters than the actual monsters, I think. So there you go. Okay. More questions from the audience. Christopher Larson asked, after uh, after just finishing Codename Freedom Book 2 yesterday, I'd like to hear more about the development and research of the training sequences. Personally, I found the training in that book to be one of the best, if not the best, I've read to date. I think we've sort of answered that a little bit. But is there anything else you want to add to that?
Um, just that one of the most important things with like a big drawn out training thing, there has to be some kind of tension that leads to different like point, or there has to be a point to every single thing that you do, or a real direction for it. So just adding training for the sake of it. I mean, I could have literally made that first 60-70% of the book 100,000 billion words if I wanted to. It's just it wouldn't have been worth it. So finding that tension um, is hard, and
Right. And I noticed that
the
in your in book 2, like you had specific goals. Even when you reached a goal, you already had another goal waiting for him. Whether it was he wants to catch it to a friend and the way that they're working out, or like he's catching up to people with their abilities, or like there's a rival. And I think that draws a lot from the same thing like Rocky or the anime, where they have specific training sequences because there's a purpose. Whether it's saving the world from Vegeta, or from like wanting to like get your chance at that world title with Apollo Creed. There's a goal that's pushing them and that's creating the reason and the tension for that training.
right, yeah, the motivation or even the outside force. Like, of course, the main character has to probably even have the main motivation that's driving the story, but then you have the outside forces that are just trying to knock them off the path.
Right,
Um,
that conflict.
yeah, and I mean, it's really just the kind of thing that I love. Um, I mean, every single one of those Japanese or the manga that or anime, it's basically made for guys where you're training, then you're fighting somebody. You're training, you're fighting somebody.
Yeah,
I mean,
yeah. I won't say it's made specifically for guys. I'd say that might be a good
well,
portion of the audience. I'm like, yeah, it's okay.
true,
Oh, I hear what you're
thank
saying.
you.
Like, it feels as a guy like, oh, I totally relate to that particular thing
Mhm.
because of the culture that I live in, or something like that, or maybe just the testosterone buildup. I don't know, but
Yeah,
I know a lot of ladies who have
thank you. Yes,
boners for
correction.
Rocky and stuff. Let's see a couple
Right.
comments from chat real quick. It says Dave Wilmar says Apollos writes very pretty. He also
Oh,
says that I can't write action. It comes out like he poked him with a sword and then poked him again, and then the bad guy poked him back, and everybody bleeded. So that's Dave's comment.
did he dodge
I don't
anything?
think there was a dodge roll in there at all. So
Just had the dodges. You're
yeah,
good.
so I think that's why he chose to do kingdom building a lot in his stories instead of just like a straight action combat thing. I'm
Oh,
just
that's
kidding,
fun
Dave. I love
though.
you. Okay, Dave actually has a question from like the ones we collected. He asked his very serious question is, does turkey count as bacon?
Turkey bacon. Oh man.
Does it count as bacon?
I like turkey bacon, but I don't think it counts as bacon. Meaning I will almost eat anything. I would never substitute the two. I think that would be a crime. I don't think it should be all bacon. I don't know what you would call it because it's kind of like bacon, but yeah, just bacon has its own just place in the world that
Yeah.
nothing can. Yeah, it's a beautiful thing.
Yeah,
Um,
it has this kind of umami profile in there, and it's just such an amazing conflux of flavors and chemical compounds that just and that the way it's fried incorporates into whether it's going to be tasty or if it's like baked as opposed to like fried on the on a grill or a stove. There's like different things, and I'm getting very hungry talking about it. But yeah, turkey bacon not so much. Sorry.
right.
It is healthier for you, apparently. I'd rather have the extra cloggage and just work out more.
Well, I will say this, even though the hard thing about giving someone advice on diet, if you're not a nutritionist
Right.
or dietitian, you can get sued. Um, but
Thanks.
never mind. I can't. Well, basically, I mean, like the fat, that sort of thing. If you're eating in moderation and it fits into your macros for the day, it's not necessarily bad for you unless you can't digest fat and that kind of thing. I mean, basically, a lot of the things with fat and cholesterol and how we eat it and that sort of thing that has had a bad rap, just look those things up because most of them are basically missed. We just didn't have enough information. We didn't know, and we were making conclusions off the studies that kind of correlated as opposed to those things weren't the causes of these issues that we thought it was.
Right.
Um,
That's how science
so
progresses. Right? Science isn't always right,
yes,
especially when it comes to nutrition science, which isn't always super sciencey, to be honest.
yeah,
It's very fad based occasionally, and it release studies on specific points of reference are turned into marketing opportunities for food trends. That's definitely the truth.
every time.
Yeah, so like it's a it's that's a different thing. But yes, this would
I
be your
love.
food hour, folks. Your healthy nutrition, not advice, observational comments and personal experiences. There you go.
Yeah, I could probably find bodybuilding.com articles, but I'm lazy.
Yeah, there you go.
Sorry.
Okay, we have a couple questions for me, just like things I added onto the audience questions.
Yeah.
We all know about your legendary love of bacon. My question is, how much bacon do you currently have in your fridge right now, and what is your current favorite flavor?
Oh boy. I can't say that I have a favorite flavor. I'll start there. Hickory, just, I mean, I'll even get the pre-cooked stuff and just nuke it. I mean, honestly, sometimes that's the best stuff just because you don't have to work. You'll get it faster than any other way, and it's bacon. Um, so how much do I have in my fridge? I think I just have one regular package. Although today for dinner, since my wife was at like a shower, um, my daughter and we got double, wait, McDoubles with bacon. They're like $2 here. So, oh, I'm loving it. Uh-oh. What has he got?
I bought bacon. I bought bacon just for you, like on the show. I was like, Apollos isn't it? Come on. And if I don't have bacon in my fridge, I'm gonna feel super bad about this. So I made sure we don't actually. I haven't
Oh
gone to the grocery store in
man,
months. I started on that Instacart thing where they give groceries to me, like they deliver it. It's super awesome, by the way. I don't want to leave my house anymore
that is
for
awesome.
any reason. So I bought bacon specifically because you were going to be on here. I was like, oh, I have to have bacon in the fridge. I had plenty of ranch. I have like three bottles of like the big stuff. I had to go out and get some bacon. So there you go. That's my thing.
That's
Uh,
awesome.
okay. Next
Oh
question I
man.
had. Okay, this is the Ready Player One. You recently saw Ready Player One, a novel some in the community consider lit RPG. I do for the novel version.
Hmm.
What did you think of the movie, man?
The first thing I'll see is I do want to see it again, which is a huge positive. I was with like 6 friends that don't read lit RPG. Whenever we saw it, everybody enjoyed it. Um, and just for that aspect alone, I got to give it 2 thumbs up. because I think it's going to be one huge for the genre. I mean, even stuff like Tron and that sort of thing.
Yeah.
I We have one thing that's clear to point to. This is what the genre is like.
Right.
Um, so that's huge. I'm kind of odd. I'm really good at separating books from movies just because having a film degree, dissecting them, I don't think I've ever seen a single book to movie work well ever. There's always something that I can pinpoint that I wanted differently, or
Right. It's just,
they just
time constraints,
totally.
story constraints. It exists. You can't turn a like 500-page novel into an hour and a half film and expect everything to translate well, even if they're like really good intentions.
Right. And also, like, spending hours and hours a day with film students, or reading critics, basically everything about that is to criticize things as much as you can. Even if there's not something to criticize, you find something anyway. So
Right.
just from that mindset, basically, if a film student or a critic doesn't like it, um, that's probably a good reason to at least try it. Now, sometimes they're right about it being bad, but often they say bad things about something that's really enjoyable.
Right.
Especially today, like, film critics, they're all about the message of the film and like certain artsy aspects to it. I don't think uh, there's been a film in the last 15 years that got an Oscar that actually made any money. The last one I think that did really well was like Braveheart, and I mean that was a long time ago. So that's my spiel, but sorry, shouldn't have even gone
It's
there.
cool. No, I honestly I
Basically,
feel the same way about
uh,
like when I do my reviews. The biggest
mhm,
thing is like, did I have a good time with this? Yes or no? And then like everything or my first question is like, is this an RPG? Yes or no? And then like, did I have a good time
yeah,
reading this story? And if I didn't, then nothing else really matters. Like it could be like the
mhm,
greatest piece of art written in the entire world. If I didn't have a good time reading it, if I didn't have an enjoyable experience, it doesn't really matter to me personally. And I know other reviewers and things do things differently, but I'm very much in mind's like have a good time with it. That's kind of the most important thing, like any film or like written, or like in having an enjoyable experience.
mhm. Yeah, absolutely. And it being entertainment, it
Yeah.
was entertaining. So,
So it was
I
entertaining
mean,
for you. You thought it was entertaining, but as have you read the book already?
um, I purposely haven't actually.
Oh,
Um,
okay. So you can't make that comparison then. Okay, so that's a very
right.
interesting.
Now, generally though, I don't go there. Lord of the Rings, being one of the big ones, Harry Potter, just any of those, I don't let myself do that in my mind. Um, so because of that, um, I can say even if I saw the book and I know it sounds like the plot isn't even really the same.
The
Um,
honestly, I saw it the first day it came out. The core concept of it, of a video game contest,
mhm,
where the stakes are the entire virtual world, and it's how it runs, is there. That is exactly the
right.
same. That core concept, like these friends versus the evil corporation who wants to try and get this ad revenue thing, and one way about
Mhm,
monetizing instead of it being this free internet experience, basically in this virtual
right.
world. That concept is still there. Ernest Cline worked on the script for this movie along with the everybody else. So that core
Mhm,
concept does translate precisely. However, all the details about what happened in the story are different to a lot of degrees. Like a lot of the pop culture reference from the book didn't make it into the movie
yeah.
for copyright issues, time issues.
Mhm,
There were a lot more from the movie that just weren't in the book because they had a bunch of like movie studio property rights. Like you don't
mhm,
really see Gundam. You don't see like Freddy Krueger in the book. Like that's in the movie though. He makes a Hammer Prince as someone's avatar, right?
right.
So there are different storytelling opportunities and cameo nerd stuff there. There were a few more story differences between the book and the movie that a lot of people point out is like
Mhm,
that shifts the tone of the storyline a little bit, and that interpersonal relationships definitely aren't as developed, and the virtuality stuff isn't as in depth as it is in the
right.
book. But again, that's the case of any story that's translated from a book.
Mhm,
You just don't have the time to do as much as you would want to. I think series, television series and internet series, whether it's on HBO or Netflix, have done a much better job of like translating stories from books into better versions, just because they have more time to do that storytelling correctly. But I'm glad that you enjoyed this
Yeah.
experience, at least for Ready Player One.
Yeah, it was fun. The biggest thing, I think, the thing that allowed it to work was actually they did a really good job of flirting with the line of 80 cheesiness,
Yeah.
and it didn't get to the cringe part, which, I mean, I love the 80s, so it wouldn't bother me, but I know in some
No,
cases
it's not as
that
appealing
would
to the
just.
larger market. Yeah.
Yes, and they did awesome with that. Now, of course, the story itself, that kind of thing. So I'd enjoyed it for um, a lot of different reasons. Um, I would never expect it to get close to the book.
Mm.
So
It's okay. I mean,
yeah.
it didn't, and the fact that it wasn't exactly like the book, it was like, oh, okay, that's life. Next up, we have Haster, who joined the chat room as well. So hey, Haster.
Hey.
Yeah, but it's like it's okay. It's fine. I know people who love the book might have been disappointed that it wasn't an exact representation of it on the screen, but that's okay. I look at it this way, like I didn't have the greatest experience with it because my expectations were
Yeah.
seeing the book on the screen, and it's not, so don't expect that. It's about like moderating your expectations. My wife loved the
Hmm.
book. She loved the movie. She's never read the book. I think I tried to force her to listen to the audiobook version with Will Wheaton once in the car on a long road trip. Didn't work out. But she liked every aspect of that movie, and she's not really a super like nerdy gamer like I am, or like into like the genre. And I
Right.
think that's kind of the thing, like that novel, that movie draws in a much larger pop culture audience than just guys who grew up in the 80s, because they're the guys who are like our age or Ernest Cline's age, who were into
Right.
like metal or like I think one of the bigger differences between like the movie and the novel is there's that that scene in the movie. This is slightly spoiler, guys. If you haven't watched the movie, just close your ears. Where they're in that movie in the movie, right? They're in the movie, right? The one with the scary one with the people who are
Right.
doing things. And in the book, it's a different movie. In the book, it is war games. So in the book,
Oh.
when they're doing like that movie stuff, and it's a lot more gamey in that they're actually taking the role of a character in the movie. Like they'll play
Mhm.
Matthew Broderick in the book version,
Right.
and they'll have to say his lines on point, and that gets them points in the game. You know what I mean? And so like acting out and doing the movie, like reenacting it, is a thing in the movie, and that's part of one of the puzzles for the larger contest, right? And but in the
Hmm.
movie, they made it more like, oh, you're just going through the experiences of the movie, but that same concept translates just
Right.
out of the movie. In the movie was a lot more popular than war games. And it appeals to a much larger audience than just like that nerdy film. You know what I mean? So
Oh,
that
sure.
to me epitomizes like the choices they made for that movie, making it more of mass appeal than just a bunch of nerdy, goofy, geeky stuff
Yeah.
that appealed to like a lot of nerds. Yeah. So there you
Yeah.
go. So perfect. A couple comments from chat. They say, as a book, Hasser says, Paul Campbell Jr., I guess,
What's up, man?
says, as a book fan, I was disappointed, but that was my fault. The movie was fantastic. Now, perfect timing was off at times, but the overall motion of the book was spot on most of the times. And I absolutely agree with that concept. It's just moderating your expectations. If you've read, if you're
Hmm.
super fan of the novel and the audiobook reading, just understand that it's not the same exact thing as the movie. And I think that's a lot of things I always just say about
Yeah.
the novels that we read as well. It's like moderate your expectations and you'll have a really good time with it. But if you go in with super high expectations, whether it's for a novel or movie, you're probably going to be disappointed.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. The last time I let myself do that was Ender's Game, just
Yeah.
because, I mean,
Such
it
an awesome
wasn't
book.
even,
It
they
is.
didn't
And the
have
movie is just like,
the
there were
car.
points where I'm like, that is supposed to be better. That's a really important point, and that was like 10 seconds. You know what I mean? I'm like,
Hmm.
yeah, at least Harrison
Yeah,
Ford is there, I guess.
that's right. Yeah.
Yeah.
No, it was still enjoyable. I
I
always
think,
ask
yeah.
to
I'm
people
like,
that haven't read it. Yeah.
if you've never read the book, you might like the movie. But if you read the book afterwards, it's better. That's usually my thing. With the exception, like maybe like I said, internet television and the marketing that Amazon and Netflix has really kind of changed the game in that respect. Like Altered Carbon on the Netflix series was a great interpretation of the book. I thought it was like, because they had like 10 or 12 episodes to do it, so they have like 10 or 12 hours almost to do
Right.
justice to the novel, and it's not a perfect copy still. It's like, to me, that's a much better rendition than an hour and a half film or a 2 hour film could have ever done. The same thing with like The Expanse, which is on an Amazon series.
Yeah, love it.
It's a sci-fi, I can remember where it's sci-fi, I see it on Amazon, but like same, that's a 3 series thing at this point, and it covers like the first 2 books so far. So I'm like, the expanded opportunity storytell is very much along the lines that we have. Like, we have larger opportunities to tell our stories as indie authors, and they do now too,
Right.
because they don't have to be beholden to a particular studio. They can do a longer series format, and it's as entertaining, and they can make as much money.
Right. Probably more, because it's
Yeah.
going to have a longer lasting thing, because you can binge that stuff. And especially, and honestly, it's about time that they're doing it, because I mean, thankfully things like Games of Thrones, or it's kind of unlocked their ability to do it. And Netflix, just them as a studio, that what they're willing to do
Mhm.
is going to change
Yeah, the risks that
all of
they are
it.
willing to take are much bigger than like a traditional movie studio, because they're not necessarily investing in like the ad opportunities. Netflix is investing in the subscription opportunities and keeping their viewers happy and expanding
Yes.
their subscription base, instead of just focusing on sure wins with a particular story type of architecture and it repeating itself. So like those indie opportunities are much bigger, right? I think for me, and
Right.
that kind of feeds into our own indie kind of style. Like the opportunity for
Yeah.
change is there, and it's just us grasping it and making it our own, I think. So I think it's a really good
Hmm.
way to end the audience conversation, unless somebody in the audience had some other question. I think Dave said, would you like to play a game? There you go. That was his question.
Yeah.
Yeah, it looks like it's in quotes.
I love games.
Yeah, I would love to play a game. So there you go. Nobody else seems to have a review real quick. Yeah, nothing. Lots of just comments about other aspects of it. So there you go.
Mm.
Don says Amazon Studios is closing their subs this year. They were a good resource for peeps because she does like script writing. So yeah, there you go.
Hmm.
Okay. Was there anything else you wanted to add that I haven't included in the review at all, or the interview?
Not at all.
No, I think you're
I got a
forgetting
Patreon. Give me
absolutely.
money.
You have a countdown deal going on right now, man, for book one. Codename
Yes.
Freedom. That's a big deal.
You're awesome. I literally did. Like, I'm getting 10 minutes from now, I would literally fall over
Yeah, I know it's late for
if
you.
you want to keep going, and just to watch me now. So yeah, countdown deal until Monday. Book one's 99 cents. Codename Freedom. Survivor Week 1. I think for the rest of the week after that, until Friday, it's going to be $1.99.
Right. So for
So
specific dates, in case people are watching this at a later time than it is live, it'll be 99 cents up until like midnight on April the 15th, 2018.
yes.
And then it'll be $1.99 until April the 20th, 2018. So go check it out. It's a really good deal. It's normally priced, I think, a couple dollars more
Yes.
than $1.99, something like $3 or $4. So they'll be
Yeah,
saving you money
3.99.
either way, but definitely go pick it up right now if you've never read it. 99 cents, great deal for this. Like, I think it is like, what is 350, 400 pages for book one.
I think 374
Oh, hey, look at
it
that.
comes out as.
Something in the middle or
Yeah.
so. I knew it was somewhere in between those. But it's a really good story. I definitely recommend it. Got a good score for me on both books. Everything you've ever written has gotten good scores because they bring originality to a lot of their concepts and to their game mechanics, and the
Mm.
storylines are just super enjoyable to me. Even though I know some people don't like slice of life stuff, these are still very fun, entertaining stories. So if you, yeah, lots of great things here. So thanks a lot for being on the show. Where can readers discover more about your work, man?
Um, so a couple different places. One, the Patreon that just went live. It's just, I guess, patreon.com/Apollos dash Thorne, something like that. But on Facebook, Facebook is like where the community's at. So just Apollos Thorne, search me and you'll find my group, you'll find my page, friend me. Just, I mean, reach out. Almost all of us are like totally available, unless my kids are crying or hitting me. you're good. I'll talk to you.
Yeah, never take toddler abuse. Be aware, spread the message.
Yes.
We also have a link in the show notes for all the places we can reach Apollos Thorne, whether it's his website, his blog. Maybe not the blog so much. It seems not updated very much.
I just didn't get to it.
Kind of looks like a
Literally.
MySpace page. If I'm going to be honest. Also on Facebook, I think is the best place to contact you. You also have a reader group,
Yeah.
or I call it a bacon group. Twitter, Amazon author page, web, everything in the show notes, folks. So go check that. You can see them on the screen now if you're watching the full production version. Many places to find his stuff, including all of the links to his actual books. Plenty of good reading material there, folks. So that's going to be it for the show. Thank you, everybody who is joining us in chat, who joined us live on the show, who wrote in questions, who are watching this afterwards. Either way, without you guys, folks, neither one of us can make a thing, whether it's watching the podcast or reading our stuff. I know we both appreciate your support and in any way, shape, or form that takes. So thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen. If you want to say goodbye, Apollos will end the particular chat. There you go, folks. Thanks, everybody. And remember, folks, until we can hang on again, remember to go read some Lit RPG. Goodbye, everybody.
Do it.